Hello. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank
Ew.
you. Thank you for joining. Yes, I am joined here by humans and animals alike. So thank you for joining. We're just going to go around and do some introductions, starting with the least important person going up to our super special guest. So my name's Dan Gerstein. I work for Pistol Shrimp. We are working on game Free Stars Children of Infinity, the sequel to the Ur-Quan Masters. And this is Mozart and this is Rocket. Fred, how about you?
I'm Fred Ford. I've worked on many games, but the one we're talking about today, Ur-Quan Masters, is is the one we're talking about today. And I am not the very special person.
We know.
We differ.
Charlie.
I'm Charlie Cleveland. I'm the game director and CEO at Unknown Worlds. And I think we're going to talk about Subnautica, although we've also been making some other stuff, including Moonbreaker, which we're finishing up right now to 1.0. But yeah, nice to see all you guys.
Cool.
I'm
Well,
excited to meet you two.
Yeah, likewise.
yeah, I'm just sort of like the matchmaker here. These two have been trying to get together, or can I point? Yeah, there we go. These two have been trying to get together for a while. So I'm gonna start with the easy front-loaded one, which is so Charlie, you mentioned Ur-Quan Masters. You wanted to meet Fred. If you actually had met Fred, you probably wouldn't have wanted to, you wouldn't have the same sentiment. But
Well, he he
Wow. Wow.
he invited me for a coffee and then he left Northern California. So I'm not exactly sure what that says.
Yeah, well, so Ur-Quan Masters, the original game came out when I was in college. I think I was a freshman. So that was 91 or 92, right around there. The amount of hours that we put into that game, we definitely should have paid a lot more. But um, God, we played a lot of Super Melee. We had tournaments in our dorm rooms. Like we basically had 6 different rooms, all with a suite, like with a living area, and we just set up tables and we just have tournaments like regularly. Um, Anderson is my favorite, by the way.
Really? That's an
Yeah.
interesting choice.
Yeah. I mean, I'd love to dive into the balance and stuff because I've never heard anything from the inside, only from the outside. But can I just tell you, like, the original game was so formative for me that as I was going to school for like computer engineering, I was doing some programming, but I was starting to get an inkling that I really wanted to make video games. And my friends and we would basically rent a house in Burlington, Vermont every summer in between semesters, for summer break. And we would want to make a game together. And this was like just the beginning of 3D. And I think the Michael Abrash graphics book had come out. So there was like Mode X programming, and Tomb Raider had just come out. There was Next Generation magazine, and we're just starting to see like what 3D games could do. Alone in the Dark had just come out.
Uh-huh.
And so of course we're like, let's make a third person action game. That's what we'll do for our first game. And we basically spent 2 summers completely failing. Like we failed to really do anything at all. And then I graduated, and I'm just whizzing by the details because they're not that interesting. But after I graduated, my one friend and we tried one more time to make a game, and we're like, you know what? Let's make a 2D game. Let's make it something small. Let's not have, we didn't call it design risk back then, but we're like, let's make it something straightforward that we know how to make. And we made a Ur-Quan Masters clone. And it was called Aquarium Fighter, and it was a aquarium, just an aquarium game with like basically all Play-Doh creatures. So we had like a turtle, we had a diver, we had a starfish, which was like kind of like kind of a Vux thing. I think I can't remember if that one slowed you down. I can't remember, but and we spent like 6 weeks, and we got just a very very basic, camera moving in and out, like 2D, just dynamic viewport with like 6 critters, each with had a special and a normal ability. That was my first game I ever made, a clone. And I will tell you that the first time we played that was one of the most memorable moments. I have to say, one of the most memorable moments of my life, because we went from making the game to actually playing it and having fun.
Yeah.
I never let go. That was 96 when we did that, and I haven't stopped since.
When we first made Space Combat, we only had 2 ships, the Vux and the Yehat. I mean, they didn't have any special powers yet. They could just shoot things. And I don't even think the Buck shot a laser. I think it shot a missile. But the screen was static. It didn't move or zoom or anything. And I programmed asteroids coming in from the sides, and the whole purpose was to not get killed by the asteroids, but to destroy them, kind of like asteroids as they came in. And that was the first iteration of the space combat, and it wasn't even PvP at that point.
So it was like a co-op asteroids
Yeah, it
with
was.
different player with different ships.
Yeah, well, we only had 2 ships, but yes,
Yeah.
they were different.
And then I bet you were like, I bet one of the players just started shooting the other ship.
I'm not sure I allowed the missiles to
Right.
collide, but it was always, you would start out in the center and be very disciplined, and then after a while you'd start chasing an asteroid and get too near the edge of the screen, and another asteroid would get you.
It's still there. That still
Yeah.
happens. I love that. Well, actually love that feature because it feels like a little bit of randomness, it just tilts you just a little bit. But of course, you can kind of predict it. If you can just remember where all the asteroids are flying around, you might be able to reduce some of that risk. But that's so fantastic. I love that that's where it started. Because it was basically, you probably saw asteroids and you're like, let's just do a little better than asteroids.
Yeah, well, and also just building up the technology to do the zooming and the assets that were needed too. We had to have ships rendered at different sizes because there was no hardware scaling or anything like that. And so it was those quantized jumps eventually when we did
Yeah.
do that, and it only got to be a smooth zoom on the 3DO.
Oh, interesting. I didn't even think about that. Okay. So you had different resolutions for each zoom level for each ship.
Yeah.
Didn't even think about that. What was I going to say about that? I did the smooth zoom. I don't think I ever saw the smooth zoom, but did that change the feel completely? It must have.
It changed the feel. I don't think anyone complained about it. I think it's something you would prefer. If you saw it first, you would prefer that to the quantized zoom.
So I think SC1 had fixed. Was it fixed? And then SC2 was smooth. It's been a while now.
Well, they both were quantized zooms until we did the 3DO version where we had some hardware assist and stuff.
And then the Ur-Quan Masters has been smooth zoom. I guess
yes, the open source port is smooth zoom.
Okay. I guess I forgot that it changed. So I guess it's not that important.
That's the power of rose tinted glasses and like growing older and having your memory become fuzzy. You don't even remember the warts.
Yeah, your memory is doing a smooth zoom. Yeah,
it's true. It's so true. I remember though I do remember all the keyboard lockups. You had like the key conflict tool.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's all the different combinations. That was like a game in itself. And all the trash talking, you're like, oh yeah, I tested it, but it's still not working. We're on a different keyboard now, and I don't know I don't know. You pressed your keys in some weird combination, and it stopped one of my keys from triggering. It was a thing.
Yeah, every keyboard was different.
Yeah. Wow.
And they still are, unfortunately.
Are they?
Just two players at one keyboard is a somewhat uncommon configuration in the modern era.
True. Although, wouldn't it be nice to have that again?
Yeah, it did add to the competitiveness for sure. And jockeying with your elbows and
oh yeah, just yeah. I remember in fighting game days at the arcade, I remember I tried to compete at various Mortal Kombats, and there was a really tiny kid that I was playing against, and he's totally reading me, reading all my moves. I'm like, how the hell are you doing this? And he basically, his vantage point, he's looking past my fingers and the joystick up to the screen. He could just see me starting to perform moves way before my character did the moves. It was sick. I mean, it was such a huge advantage. So There's some.
That's the story you tell yourself.
That's true. That's true. You might be right. You might be
Oh, that's
right.
the classic LAN party trick, you play, you're playing StarCraft with your friend and then overwrite, like look at the monitor. What are you doing over
But he's
there?
looking at my fingers, like doing like, freeze or something like that. Or like, so he could just see my fingers moving towards the buttons and then start reacting. I mean, it probably doubles he like basically, if normally it'd be like 40 or 50 milliseconds before he would see the character moving. I bet he could chop that in half. I don't know. I'm sticking to my story. I think he got a fair advantage on that.
Pinball wizard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
don't compete with children. That's what I've learned.
oh,
They have secret advantages you won't consider.
Except in
true.
arm wrestling usually works, but
There you go. That's a good point.
Or at least use your sheer weight or size, knock them
Yeah.
over. You're going to get some funny house rules real quick.
Sure. I love that.
So, well, I was just curious because you brought up ship balance too, and you're talking about like super melee tournaments. I mean, this is something that still continues with our community today, where they have house rules, where they've figured out certain ships are overpowered. There's actual
Really?
balance mods that have come out that try to balance ships differently, and it's all been, people are still playing Ur-Quan Masters and super melees in particular, and there's some very fierce competitive talk about what wins, what loses, etc. Like, what was your experience of that? And like, did you carry that into Aquarium Fighter? I'm curious.
I have to say we played the crap out of it, and I don't remember any balance problems. I say that with true. I really mean it. I mean, there was no ships that were banned. I'm trying to think if there was any that we would. I can't think of any. I mean, different players were so good at certain ships that it was just them doing their thing. Like we had the Pakunk person, we had the Anderson person, we had the Vux person, but like, I don't know. We definitely had a Spathy person, the most irritating person in the entire world.
and that was even before the game.
Yeah.
That was before what? Before exactly. Oh my gosh. I mean, I have to say, we never banned any ships. We never said that ship is cheap. We never said I can't play around that. It was you could always play around it. Now, obviously, certain ship matchups were biased. That's 100% true. But that all layered into the strategy, So no, I think it was spot on. What are the ships that people say are overpowered?
Spathy.
No.
Yeah, Spathy and Third Ash come up a lot, but a lot of the biggest one that, I mean, keep in mind, people have had a lot of time to play it. Yeah, but
I could see him being in the hands of an expert for that. What is he, 12 points for that? He was on the edge of unbalance for sure.
A lot of it is like match stalls is the real problem. So they maybe are solving for another problem, which again wouldn't exist if you had two people sitting at a keyboard together, because to borrow a phrase from Paul, if you just got frustrated, you would step on their toe. But if somebody's just playing like a jerk, installing a match out, I could see, I could definitely see, oh yeah, that would be a problem. But if my friends started doing that, I would just like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Cut that out.
The thing is, that's Spathy, right? And you're just playing Spathy the way Spathy's meant to be Spathy. So that's just part of the game. Like, it's a waiting game. I mean, maybe as an older person now, I would hate that. But like, as a 20-year-old, it was fantastic.
I think your feelings toward a person standing right next to you are always going to be different from a person on the internet, wherever, that you can't like have physical interactions with. And that's true beyond games. And even as we were here in the Zoom meeting, getting to see faces like creates more empathy and things like that. So I think people not seeing their opponent like as a human being can create interesting behavior.
True. I mean, I'm wondering, how did you just design and tune all those ships by feel? Like figure out what the role
yeah. I mean, pretty much we just designed them to be fun to fly around and shoot and make good sounds and have funny powers. And we tried to balance them just a tiny bit, but it was more important to have fun flying them around. And then we kind of used the cost as the balancing thing. We weren't trying to make a fighting game where every ship can beat every other ship, and it was really a rock, paper, scissors thing. And so the balancing for us was just pricing them reasonably so that you could go your own way when you made your team, but in the end it would be fun. That's really what it was.
Did you design each one like for this game Moonbreaker that I've been working on for years now? It's a strategy, turn-based strategy game, like a digital miniatures game. Um, we designed every unit to have basically be a tool, like a tool in the toolbox. So this unit can like paralyze a group of clustered units, or this unit is like a sniper, or this, they all had it. They're all just tools. And we never even thought about, is that tool useful or not? It's more just like, let's just keep adding tools to the toolbox and make sure each one can do the thing that we want it to do. And then players are going to figure out how to use all the tools together. I wonder if
No,
that.
no, it was never
Oh,
like that really. It was just we don't have a ship that shoots from the sides or whatever. That's the
right,
Pakunk or
right.
and I pretty much made all of the ships and how they expressed themselves without the artwork
No
because
kidding.
because back then there was no there were no like IDEs where you say, okay, I'm going to give him, 12 health and whatever. And so I would just try to make something that I thought was fun. And I'd say, here, Paul,
Yeah.
let's try this out. And then he would
Right.
get inspired uh, by how it handled and he would connect some artwork and sounds to it. And yeah, that's how we made him.
Were they like spheres or boxes, or did you have any stand-in art, or just or a
Um,
circle?
they uh oftentimes they were just a ship we'd already made,
Oh,
at least artwork wise, so that
paint
we had,
color, and then
yeah, and then it would just have different missiles, and oftentimes that artwork would be borrowed from somewhere else, and
right.
uh, yeah,
That's fantastic. And people like I feel like people overstate the difficulty of balance, or the not even the difficulty, but like the importance of it. And I always say like, fun is more important than balance because it's so easy to get down the rabbit hole and just like try to, ensure that everything is balanced and you want to pre-balance. It's kind of like programming, like pre-optimization is the root of all evil. It's kind of the same. It's like pre-balance is the root of all game design evil because you just like you're going to strip out all the fun before you even get no one cares if it's balanced if you stripped out all the fun. So
yeah,
you want that fantasy to come through, and then you'll figure out you just adjust the cost or you come up with some disadvantage later. But yeah, I just feel like most people like they talk so much about like it's so hard to make the balance right and to like you have all these elaborate spreadsheets and stuff like that. It's like not really.
yeah, it's just much easier to say up front it's not balanced.
Or just say like we can, yeah. I mean, obviously for a competitive game, it can be more difficult, but like I don't know. I
I
just
think
think it's
it's like cart before the horse is like when we were doing our development streams, that's how
uh,
I'd often talk about it, which is if I have a balanced ship that's no fun, then that's a problem. If I have an unbalanced ship that's tons of fun, then that's a good problem to
yeah,
have, you know?
yeah, that's a
And
good
for
way of
me, it's
thinking
like
of it.
very tactile. Like, am I having fun with my hands on the keyboards doing
Yeah,
whatever this ship does? And ships are really like characters, they
yeah,
express themselves in the world in different ways. And like, can I relate to it and connect to it? Or do I watch someone else play and go, they're having fun with this, or oh God, they hate themselves right now.
yeah,
Then
totally.
we can balance it later. That's just tuning some numbers and things like that. It's hard to make something, especially in a game like Super Melee, where the conceit is it's not balanced, like Fred said. It's hard to make something impossible to balance. I mean, maybe some heated League of Legends players would name a couple characters that they think are just broken by default, but harder to make fun than balance for me anyway.
So wait, so the concession is you're just saying Super Melee is unbalanced? Because I take issue with that. I don't think that's true.
No, the ships are not necessarily, it's rock, paper, scissors. So the idea is
Right.
in
Yeah.
aggregate, like the fun
Yeah.
is like make a squad. Do you want to be balanced? Do you want to get really good? Like you said, favorite ship, Androsynth, right? Like I loved the Druge, I remember playing. So I would overload Druge, but if there's a ship that
Minda,
counters
where
the
are you?
Druge.
We had a Druge player who could just snipe all the way across the map. It's like, how? How are you doing that? Like you're predicting where I'm gonna be, and just like, wow.
They'll
Yeah,
never find his body. Yeah.
pretty much. That was a nice balancing mechanism you had in there because you had to eat their own crew to get
Yeah.
more ammo. So like there was always I felt like there's always ways you can put bake negatives in on top of the fun. And actually that was so thematic, with the screaming and stuff when you reload. It's fantastic. Yeah.
No joke. We actually just the person who's making our sounds just did we're trying a few different approaches for the audio, and we effectively he remade that audio. And the first time I heard it, I couldn't stop laughing because at the fidelity of the time, if you listen to the Ur-Quan, I said, like, what's going on. And it's sort of like a funny joke, but also because it's lo-fi, it
Yeah.
doesn't sound that real.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
modern version of it, which is just like a blow-by-blow reenactment of that sound, I just started laughing. And I'm like, I can't imagine being in the middle of a competitive battle and then hearing this whole drawn out sequence happen. It was
Right.
legitimately, I started cracking up.
Right. That's funny.
Yeah.
It never seemed that gory or awful. It just seemed like you're talking about the Druge,
Yes.
yeah, it was like
Yeah.
like it wasn't so bad. It was like more,
In hi-fi, trust me, it gets kind
it's
of
like
bad.
grizzly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a little like, oh, this is too real now.
This is too much. Yeah, yeah.
I
Yeah.
feel bad.
It was like cartoony back then or stylized, and now it's like brutally realistic.
Exactly. Realism ruins everything.
Right.
Go back to pixels. Go back to like lo-fi sounds.
Yeah, no kidding. I want to talk about single player.
Sure.
So I've not played the single player for decades. And of course, Subnautica did actually some pretty interesting nonlinear single player story stuff, which basically we had I call it multilinear narrative, multilinear storytelling. So we had 9 different storylines, but each storyline, they were all simultaneous, but they were all kicked off at different times depending on what you did. So if you and your friend are both playing through the game, if you just start taking notes and comparing notes, you might say it might feel like you're playing 2 different games. But each storyline is just completely linear, but it's just when they start and when they stop is all up to the player. Or sometimes there's some random events that kick off things. So that was a way that we kind of created a more dynamic feeling and alive, responsive feeling story without having to make it overly complicated. But I remember having similar feelings comparing, where we all were in Ur-Quan Masters single player. I remember my friend Chaminda was like, oh, in my playthrough, I think it was the Kara had taken over and they had literally spread all over the whole galaxy. And I'm like, I don't think that happened in mine, but maybe I just wasn't far enough. And again, rose-colored glasses. So
Yeah.
Any dynamic stuff? Am I just totally?
Oh no, well, the Korra thing was on a time schedule, and you could extend the time, but if you dawdled too much, they started exterminating everybody in the galaxy. You could always win the game, no matter where you were in it, if you knew what to do before the time period ended. So you could,
Right.
if you hadn't gotten some item from some race that normally would just hand it to you, if they were exterminated by the Korra, then you would go to their planet and you'd find ruins, and that item would be on the planet. We're just ready for you to scoop up. So,
Nice.
So you could always beat the game,
Yeah.
if you were sufficiently aware, and it was very nonlinear. Although there were certain, you could go any way you wanted to, and you would usually find something to do, and not everything that you could do was necessary or for the plot, for the main plot. But we kind of segmented off the story into a few chapters where you couldn't really get to the later chapters if you hadn't done enough of the first chapters, kind of to to progress there. So there was some subtle gating just for allowing you to do certain things that we wanted you to be prepared for by stuff you did earlier.
Mm-hmm. So it's basically just like case by case basis, but you wanted to make sure that the game was always beatable, and you just had some like smart choices there where like you didn't have to have all this branching storyline where like if the Kara had taken over this planet, then we have to like change something. You're like, well, just leave all the items there. Maybe they don't have the resources, but you can get the items at least, so you can the critical path is still available.
Yeah.
And is that kind of it? Were there other special cases, other like quote unquote emergent behaviors that players felt?
Well, one thing that people always talk about, it's kind of hard to to analyze your own game sometimes because you know how it's supposed to be played and
Right.
or how you meant it to be played and stuff. But a lot of people always talk about the star map, how when you went back to the star map, you would see spheres of influence moving around. And so that gave them a real sense of the universe kind of being alive outside of their input. Um, Although a lot of the things that happened were because of something the player did, uh,
Really?
like the Pekunk and the Yehat uh, kind of reunifying, or the Pekunk disappearing, um, and like the Thradash and the Ilrath going after the Thradash if you sicked them on it. But none of that stuff you had to do. And you could make the Pekunk return back to their home star system a few times, but eventually they would throw themselves onto the Yehat, and it turns out it was a happy ending, although it didn't seem so at the time because it seemed like, oh my God, the Bekunk are gone. But
Right.
then at the end of the game, you'd find out that they kind of melded with the Yehat.
Uh, was the map like hard coded, or was it actually somewhat randomly generated? It must be a little bit randomly generated.
The star placements were all hand placed. Paul wanted to have certain arrangements of constellations, but after that, the universe was generated, 99% generated with, I guess there were like 500 placed stars, and then I think there turned out to be around 3,000 planets that were procedurally generated um, at those stars, um, and all of them, the surface was procedurally generated except for the Earth, which obviously had to have a recognizable
Right.
surface. Um,
So some of the stars were hand placed for like story reasons or practical reasons, and then
all of the stars were hand
oh,
placed. Some of the stars had story
right,
attached to them,
right.
or some of the planets at the stars. Um,
How the hell did you build this? Like this doesn't sound easy to build.
well, we did run a little late, and we didn't get paid for 6 months, so uh, we really just loved what we were doing, or we were crazy, or both. And but it's one of those things where we didn't there were no genres back then. There was not, obviously,
Right.
first person shooters hadn't even really happened yet. Um,
Yep.
and I mean, there were like story games like Monkey Island and all those sorts of things, and the Sierra games, and but there were no templates for us to follow when we were making this. It was just
Yeah.
like, let's make a space game. We liked Star Wars. Let's make a space opera with wacky aliens, and
Yep.
um, but we didn't really have a blueprint to follow. So we just kind of said, well, okay, we're going to need a lot of planets. There's only two of us. Self-preservation, we're going to have to generate as much as we can because we can't do it by hand. And um, it was just all kind of necessity being the mother of invention back then.
It's amazing. And did you have any tools for making that stuff for authoring the star map, or did you just
Paul made a little tool to place the stars. it wasn't anything really significant. It was just
Mhm.
some place he could place stars and read it back in and write it out, and then I could consume it and put it into the game. And um,
And what about all the resources on the planets? Were those like
all,
generated within bands of like
all
low and high?
yeah, all procedurally generated, except for like special resources, like the Vux Beast was on a particular planet, and yeah, but uh, based on the color and the color of this and size of the star would sort of determine what kinds of planets could be around it, and then where like the Goldilocks zones were, and then the Goldilocks zones would say, okay, well then there's probably some life on this planet, and but that way it was all procedural. Yeah. In fact, we didn't even really know what was in our own universe
Yeah.
until after the game had shipped and we were asked to make a clue book. And so then I just wrote a thing that visited each star and cataloged what was there, and that became part of the clue book. It was at that point that we
That's amazing.
realized we'd like forgotten some stars in constellations. So, normally there was like Alpha, like Centauri, Beta Centauri, whatever, all the way, a few Greek letters, and we realized, oh, this constellation, we forgot Gamma for some reason. And so in the clue book, we just made up a reason for
Yep.
why that star had vanished. But it wasn't pre-planned. It was just making lemonade out of lemons.
Amazing. I've never heard of somebody writing a tool to create a clue book for their own game. That's like so cool. You had to,
Yeah,
if you're gonna do it. Oh my gosh. Like other people would have like a Notion or like a Google Doc where they planned out everything and like try to figure it all out. And good luck with that. Like for 500 stars, have fun. It's pretty
yeah. I guess if we had really known what we were doing, we would have been scared. But
exactly. Yeah. This is like beginner's mind, essentially.
yeah, it was like you and renting the house with your friends trying to make something. It was just,
It's like I mean, we didn't know what we were getting into. We're like, of course we're gonna try to figure this out. Like sure, we'll make Tomb Raider as our first game with no software. Literally, we didn't even have 3D Studio Max. That was like way out of our price
yeah,
budget.
deluxe paint was what we used for for Ur-Quan Masters.
I don't think we even had a plan for the art. I don't think we had. I mean, the job that I got, my first game job that I got after that summer, I worked at Papyrus, which made racing games. They were bought by Sierra a long time ago, and I hate racing, but I worked there. And they were making all their art for their cars with graph paper, like pencil paper, graph paper. It was like insane. They would basically, artists would write this stuff down on paper and then I guess type in a whole bunch of coordinates into a text file somewhere. It's just like, yeah, this was like super old school.
Yeah.
But it's amazing what you guys accomplished. Like, it's really inspiring. Like, have you seen, are there, I can't even think of any other games that have done anything like this. I mean, No Man's Sky comes to mind a little bit, but
Mass Effect is usually
yeah, I could see the Mass Effect thing, but I haven't played much Mass Effect. But this just seems so much more interesting than Mass Effect. Mass Effect has so many like conversation trees, and to me, that's just like I find that really boring. But I don't know. I like the more simulation, more simulation, or like RimWorld is kind of getting closer, maybe. But like I
Yeah,
can't.
the amount of simulation that is in the Ur-Quan Masters is almost not as much as what people think is there. That's what I find like very compelling when I
Right.
listen to people talk about like,
Totally.
oh, I played it and like, oh, it was this living, breathing universe. And then, again, maybe it's the like Fred saying, if you know what's under the hood, it doesn't feel that way. But there's a lot of,
Yeah.
illusion, smoke and mirrors going on there. And I don't know how, like as a creator, it's fun to make that, but you're sort of the magician behind the curtain going, well, I know what's
well,
really happening.
yeah, I mean, one of the things that, so because everything was procedurally generated, the planets and their like atmosphere and all of that and their composition, chemical composition, and what you could find there, and all of that stuff was procedurally generated and made some sort of sense, but it wasn't exciting. It was just oh, here's another planet that has these this atmosphere and these minerals, and it wasn't until we made the planets kind of like characters by giving them descriptive names like Treasure World or Ruby World or Cracked World, and that they that it sort of prodded the imagination into paths that we liked better than there.
Right.
Here's this planet that you could deconstruct, and you would see that we were so clever with how we designed the atmosphere and stuff like, and that just wasn't fun. So
So
we made
you probably named the planets after you generated them, right?
yeah.
Like at runtime, you just name them, right?
Yeah, well, it was like that, but a little more like once we had our algorithms down, we could create different looks, and and so it was more like looking at this planet and saying, oh, look, it's got all these facets on it because of the way we generated the topography. So that looks kind of like a gemstone. And
Right.
so, we'll color it red in these cases and it'll be a ruby world, and we'll color it green in these cases and it'll be an emerald world. And, basically the same topography generation. But
Right. Interesting. Okay, speaking of the planets, I wonder, so the whole lander, like essentially mini game, right? All the landers, where you're going around driving, picking up minerals. That's a design choice that, I mean, I never would have made, I don't think. But it's so interesting. What did you play the game without that before?
well, yeah, I threw out a couple months work because we thought we were going to do something that was much more like a Star Trek landing party, where you actually compose the crew out of
Right.
aliens in your that are with you, and if you had a spathy squad leader, that would affect how he would interact with the aliens on the planet,
Somehow.
and it just was more busy work for the player. Like, oh, I'm gonna do book work, I'm gonna do bookkeeping here to
Yep.
create the crew and do this, and
Yep.
this guy's got experience now doing that, and it wasn't that immediate. And we just said, well, what if we just hop into the lander and drive around and shoot at things?
Right.
And that was way more fun. And so that work just got thrown out.
You know what? It reminds me of the Sid Meier. Sid Meier wrote a biography recently, and it's truly fantastic. I've read it a couple times now, and he has a quote in there which is like, "One good game is better than two great games," and that's kind of, and what that means is like you're basically making a second game where you're like the crew landing sequence with all the different characters. It's just a different game. Like it's a whole separate thing that you have to optimize for and play for. And it doesn't matter how good that game is, it could be amazing. And then you have your top level game where you're flying around and the space exploration and of course the melee stuff. But like at some point, it just the parts get too complicated and they're competing with each other. And you can't even remember what you were doing when you zoom down and you're doing something on the planet. And then you come back up again, you don't even remember what you were doing at the high level. So like the distraction of like trying to make a crew that would work on the planet, it doesn't matter how good it is, it's going to be separate from the main game and it's going to distract from the main game, which
Yeah.
is the melee and flying around, planet to planet. So I wonder if that's why that didn't work.
Yeah. We also had a mode where you come into a solar system and you send your escort ships off as like, you go investigate this planet, you go investigate that planet. Um, and again, it was taking away something that was fun for the player to do and having the computer do it, which isn't fun. I mean, maybe it is for
That's
the
fun.
computer, but yeah,
The total quantity of fun in the game just got reduced.
yeah.
You know, like there's less fun because literally the computer would do half of it for you.
Yeah.
So by the time you finish, you actually had less fun.
Yeah, there's gradients of that, although Paul and we've come to refer to that as the Paul Ritchie rule, which is, in his words, he gets to relearn it every time he makes another game. Because we keep making the same mistake of like, oh, it'll be fun to have a companion do this, and it never is. Don't do something fun for me that I could be having fun with.
Right.
You know, the inverse, or maybe the corollary to that is, it's okay if you optimize, if the player earns their way out of it because something maybe isn't fun forever. Like, oh, it's fun for a while to do this, but then automating it, and like now they've graduated, and hey, we have a whole world, open world survival craft has proven a whole gameplay loop of like, oh, it's fun to do it by myself by hand for a while, but in Factorio or whatever, now I have a machine that does it for me, and that's cool too.
Yeah, yeah. It's fascinating. I just can't believe what amazing work you guys did on that game. Like it's just shocking to think about what went into that game. And it was obvious even back then. Like it was a masterpiece then. And like looking back on it, I just want to play it now. I want to actually see it with
We had no idea
bring it back.
how it would be received. Um,
How did
yeah,
it do? Did it do well? I hope it did.
it 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 didn't do great. I think, we were right on the cusp of like 3D games coming out, and a bunch of 3D games came out pretty shortly thereafter, and including like Wing Commander, the first, and that kind of stole any momentum we had.
Mm.
I mean, our game has had legs, but that could also be because we released it to the open source. But
Right.
um,
It's amazing. So what are you guys changing for the sequel? Or what's the idea behind the sequel? Like what are you keeping the same and what are you changing roughly?
I don't know, Fred, you want to answer? I usually would take this. I'm gonna make, oh, you get to try, give your shot, then I'll give my shot.
That's the tough questions.
Yeah.
um,
Or do you know yet?
There's a lot we know, there's a lot we don't know, but I'll let Fred has I ramble. Fred has like good cogent responses, so I'll let him get in front of it and then I can ramble.
Right.
well, that's a hard question to ask of me because technology has changed so much since that day. Uh, I'm I'm actually developing uh, it's not a game engine so much as it's like a core gameplay scripting module, which allows you to make multiplayer peer-to-peer uh, experiences right out of the box. You don't have to write a server. You don't. So I'm kind of concentrating on the nuts and bolts of how to make multiplayer games for just even a normal person to make them.
Oh, wow.
Um, and and so part of that is we are really trying to make this game, besides just melee, have multiplayer components, even the adventure game, um, so that you can play with a friend. And um, I'd say that's kind of the main thing I'm doing differently. I mean, other than 30 years of technology happening, but
There's that. But are you guys ready for an engine then? Or
well, like I said, it's not really a game engine. It has no graphics. It's a design engine.
right?
So you design your game in it, and it's guaranteed to work multiplayer over the network, and without a server. So it's just peer-to-peer multiplayer. Yeah.
Yeah, so it'll do all your physics and gameplay effectively, and we can give you a demo sometime if you want.
I would love it.
We've
And I want to be a customer, so I want to.
Oh, you can. We've given it. I mean, this is a bit of a tangent, but one of the fun parts about like, I mean, I think it's the first time I've worked in indie development. I was under the umbrella of Activision. Fred kind of has been around long enough to sort of experience different arcs and whatever. But one of the cool parts about do it our own way is we gave away our tools. You can actually play a Super Melee prototype right now that runs in our tools, and people have taken it. Some people have made their own ships. This was a long time ago, actually. And other people have made their own games. Someone made a pinball game. Someone made a Joust clone. Someone made an Arkanoid clone just with our tool set. So, I mean, I got my start. Modding is near and dear to my heart, and that's how I got started in games. Is like, oh, let's make a mod for Marathon. Actually, there's a deep cut. I don't even know if you're familiar with Marathon.
Oh, of course.
Okay, yeah.
Familiar with Marathon.
No, it's like hey, I didn't even have a PC. I didn't play a PC game until I turned 16 because I only had Macs,
Wow.
So it was like I missed
That's
out on a
sad.
lot of games. Pardon?
That is a little sad.
It is a little sad, but you know what? I've made up for it in my old years. But anyway, so without getting too off track, yeah, we've released it to people and let them do things, and it's pretty cool to see what they've been able to do. But fundamentally, what I think part of what Fred's getting at is, well, we can kind of do whatever we want because we're not necessarily limited by technology. We're more limited by budget and other things and time. And, so what I'd say, the true honest answer, and you'll appreciate this as a creator, is we're still learning exactly what's going to be right.
Yep.
The nice thing about having a game like Ur-Quan Masters as a template is nothing really needs to go. There's a few parts like the hard time limit that maybe some players don't know about. That's something, we still want to play with. Death is a huge mechanic, that was like very much 30 years ago, you would expect to just die if you made a mistake, all the time. And like, how do we want to handle that this time around? A lot of other games have proven, die and respawn can work. There's all sorts of different ways to tell your story. And so, not saying I don't want to give away too much, but we did a bunch of live development streams and people have seen a lot of experiments. So what I will say is we have the Ur-Quan Masters running in our game. I mean, it just runs. It's there. It's good enough. We could remake the Ur-Quan Masters if we wanted to. Some of what Fred alluded to is really more what we're still trying to figure out, which is, okay, well, big ones that we know for sure is the original engine ran at 24 frames per second and had 16 fixed firing angles because the sprites were drawn at each click. We could do that. It would be a very conscious decision and a very weird kind of anachronistic decision.
Yeah.
But we have ships that run at 60 frames per second and turn and thrust smoothly instead of in like hitched intervals. So, there's sort of like, call it modernizations there. Co-op, yeah, that's a big one. I mean, right now, like, hey, we can play Super Melee on the internet. You can with Ur-Quan Masters, just to be fair, but it's very like open port, that kind of thing. This is all peer-to-peer. We have Super Melee running with N ships. We haven't figured out what the upper limit of N is, but we had a 4-player match going. I mean, we tested on Twitch. I think we got 8 people in a Super Melee match. It was
oh my gosh.
It was chaos. It was pure chaos.
The camera just like zoomed out the whole time, basically.
We've played with a few. Sorry, good, Fred.
It would choose or you would have a main opponent that you were after. So
nice. Oh,
but still the things happening from off screen and getting into what you were trying to concentrate on was just too much.
Total chaos.
Yeah, and the size of space, like one of the I think one thing I really love about working on games is you don't have to know the answer. And in fact, sometimes it's more fun to not know the answer. You'll find out when you play it, and you get to play it before anybody else does. So hopefully you catch it before a player does. But one thing that I never thought of, and like whatever, we've all been working on games for a while, is like adding another ship to the actual space, like the physical geographical space of Super Melee makes it too small. Well, just one more ship makes it too small. Two more ships makes it 5 times too small. The amount of like, oh wow, this space, if we're going to support more players, we actually need to make the space larger, or else there's nowhere to hide, nowhere to go. And the ships that do well up close are gonna they just slaughter you.
I love that you could do a battle royale thing with a giant space, and you do can you imagine 100 ships going in, giant space? You got your current target, and you can see them like, oh, I got to stay away from this area because there's 2 Kara over there. Okay, I'll just go around this way. Like I don't know, that could work pretty well.
We could try it. I mean, Fred's probably about to cry saying we're taking this sort of, just created first shot at multiplayer. And again, engine's a bit of a misnomer. But I'll
Right.
just, for the sake of simplicity, call it an engine. And like, we don't really know how far this scales up, but let's try 100 players.
Gosh.
I don't know if that work, but I'm down to try it. And there's, I've done different development streams, co-op is a big part too. So like just looking at the gaming market,
Yeah.
look, I used to go to arcades too and play Street Fighter, or like my favorite was X-Men Children of the Atom, actually. And so like that and like Soul Calibur were my favorites.
Yep.
And 1v1 fighting games, I would say, are more of a niche genre now. And Super Melee,
I
like
think
of course.
1v1 in general is basically niche, as I
Yeah.
learned painfully from Moonbreaker.
Oh, okay. Well, actually, I'd be curious to ask about that. But yeah, that's one of those things where, hey, it'll be awesome to support Super Melee just the way it was from the Ur-Quan Masters. And we do have that right now.
Yeah.
And we want to provide that experience, especially for people who want to go back to have that experience. And, if you only have one friend to play with and you want to play competitively, it's really cool that we can serve that genre, audience, niche, whatever. But especially for me and my as I've gotten older, like my taste and my own appetite to fight 1v1 with my opponent, like I'll play chess, I'll play a board game with you or something, but I don't know, video games, like reflex twitchy stuff, I'd rather be on your side and work together, and that's much more
you're not alone on that. I feel like that's a broad trend right now.
yeah. So I'm tired of all the fighting in the world, and I'm old and my reflexes have waned.
Yeah, and you want to feel good whenever you sit down to play a game, because your time is precious and it gets more and more precious as you get older. So you want to make sure that if you feel good when you win, usually, although you feel a little bad because you just beat up your friend, that doesn't feel great. And then you certainly feel crappy if you just got your butt kicked. So yeah.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is a broad trend. And, I'm for like, I mean, Fred, I don't know how much this is true for you, but, we worked on Skylanders and that was 2-player co-op. And the only thing I wish I could have done on Skylanders that I didn't get a chance to do is 4-player co-op.
Right.
And the cool part about that too, that again, this is a trend in other games, is you can have players of differing skill levels that can still play together. And like seeing a kid play with their older sibling who's maybe a little more competent with the controller, or a kid and a parent, and seeing them like bond over a game, that's, I don't know,
Amazing.
not to sound totally sentimental. Yeah, thank you, you did it for me. I'm precious about all that kind of stuff, but I love it. That's the best feeling in the world. And if a game can bring two people together in that way, good, I've done my job, I don't even care.
Yep. No, I'm with you. Totally with
Yeah.
you. But it's definitely it's a change, because like how we grew up, making games, it's just all competitive and single player and then competitive, and now it's just basically co-op teams. That's kind of the large trend, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, and I grew up, like you mentioned, LAN parties. Like that was how I got into PC gaming too, and natural selection came up at LAN parties
Okay.
too.
Talk
And it
about
was
that.
like, yeah, no, seriously, we played like, look, we were kids, we didn't have any money. We may have acquired a few games in certain ways that
I
I
see
would
Goes
rather not.
around, comes around. Yeah, exactly.
Karma's a bitch.
Hey, it was a mod. It's okay, but
Oh, natural section 1 even.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. Oh no, we played Natural Selection. I was playing Natural Selection 1.
Wow.
How old was I? Probably 18 or something. I don't know.
Wow.
But yes, so yes, going back to that, that was kind of like, yeah, we grew up in LAN parties, but the taste for that sort of thing. I even have a friend group. Once per year we'll get together, and not during COVID, we stopped this, but we'd get together and have a LAN party. And at that moment, yes, I'll play a competitive game. Yes, I will jump in Counter-Strike, and yes, I will play together and
Yep.
have fun, pretend violence or whatever. But, that's only because my friend's sitting right next to me or across the room and I could yell at him and, call
Yeah,
him like silly things. Nowadays, kind of like what you were talking about, I'm curious what your experience with that has been like, going from like, you made a hyper competitive game, super competitive game, and then going into something like Subnautica, which is like almost I would call non-violent.
it's certainly non-combat.
Yeah.
There's a little violence because of course the creatures attack you, but and they can be pretty scary, but it's like, I would probably call it non-violent. And that was a big reaction to the Sandy Hook shooting when we started. It was 2013. And I was just like really upset that we just continued to have these mass shootings and that we couldn't change our gun laws. And I'm like, I think guns have a place, like we don't need to outlaw them completely, but we do need to get them out of cities. And I certainly didn't want to after spending like 10 years on natural selection 1 and 2, I just didn't feel like spending a lot of time like making another gun shooter game, a shoot people in the face game. Just wanted to try something different creatively. So that's where that came from. And then it ended up by being like a huge selling point for the game because kids could play it, and it was still like pretty scary. I mean, it's definitely an incredibly scary game, but for some reason, kids seem to be a lot more immune to some of the fear and terror in that game. It was like the adults that had the problem with it. The kids were a little more like blissed out, swimming deep in the ocean, and they'd get scared a little bit, but it wasn't like this existential fear that adults have grown to, like, I don't know if little kids get like agoraphobia or like even thinking about running out of oxygen. Obviously, they're scared of the dark. There's a ton of fears in Subnautica. It's just like, it's like go down the checklist. It's just like there's 20 fears in here: alone, dark, running out of oxygen, big creatures, caves, like I don't know, starvation. I already said isolation. There's like or I forgot what nyctophobia is at the ocean. Some people are just scared of the ocean by itself.
Thalassophobia, is that?
Thalassophobia. Oh, that's
Yeah.
thalassophobia. Yeah. Thank you. I forgot what nycto is. Been learning all the names. There's like dozens of fears in that game, and that really led to the primacy or primal nature of the game, and it led to just basically sales and popularity. People just loved watching it on stream. They loved playing it. It was just super compelling. But single player, never done any single player game before that. I mean, I was working on, like I said, Aquarium Fighter was the Super Melee clone. Then I worked on a racing game, then like a programming strategy game, then a real-time strategy game. That was Empire Earth, and then Natural Selection 1, Natural Selection 2. None of those were single player. So I think for me, I always want to work on something different. I don't want to specialize. I want to like keep trying new genres and keep trying new things, which can be a problem because, you can't really get super good necessarily at one thing. But it allows us, like Natural Selection did pretty well. Natural Selection 1 had maybe like 300,000, an audience of 300,000. Natural Selection 2, maybe like 1 million or a bit more. But Subnautica was like 20 or 30 million. I mean, it was huge. That game just blew up, and I don't know how, but like, so if we hadn't switched gears, that never would have happened, and then we switched gears again with Moonbreaker, which is like it's literally a digital miniatures game. Like it's a sci-fi world with, by Brandon Sanderson, like famous sci-fi author. You are literally painting digital miniatures that are unanimated, and you have a non-grid based movement strategy game. It's literally like Warhammer, but like that stylized look and really intense turn-based combat, super deep, really wild abilities. And that game like hasn't done very well. Like it's basically just not gonna, just basically a failure more or less, like especially compared to Subnautica. But like it was really important for us to keep trying new things, and we never would have gotten Subnautica if we didn't try new things. So kind of forgot how I got started on that tangent, but
I was just curious, like, what was it like going from like this very multiplayer heavy
Oh,
thinking
yeah.
into like single player? Like, did you learn things? Did things translate? Were you able to draw inspirations from other places, or is it just like you said, you always wanted to do something different? So was it all translated? I'm just curious what that was like for you.
Yeah, I think the team was really excited to switch gears after so long on a multiplayer shooter. This still had the first person immersive stuff that we have from Natural Selection 1 and 2, but it was nice to just craft a world and be, not have to, like NS2, we had so many complicated environments and high detail environments, and you're just whizzing through them, right? You're just running through as fast as possible, especially as an alien. So I think the level designers really enjoyed making a world that people could slow down and swim by calmly and just really kind of bliss out. Story wise, gosh, I mean, we learned a lot. Like I was talking about the multilinear storytelling. We didn't know that's what we were doing. We didn't have a clear idea of how the story would be structured. In fact, we didn't even know we were going to have a story based we didn't know there's going to be a story at all. It wasn't until a few months into early access, I think maybe 5 to 6 months before we even decided to make a story. It was never, it was always going to be more of a creative, more of like a Minecraft, survival crafter. And then, we had a writer approach us and say, this game really needs a story. We agreed, and we just started working together. And then we were working on a story for 2 years. And it turned out that that would be like one of the most important things that we ever added to that game. It really made it shine,
That's really cool. But the game was running and like you envisioned it without a story as you got started?
It wasn't that we envisioned it without, it was more like, we had very fixed resources. We took all the NS2 money we had, which is about $3 or $4 million. And we had a team of like 15 about at that time. And we just like had to make a new game. So we're like, okay, let's just start. And we maintained NS2 for a year while a skeleton crew started making Subnautica. And then we started bringing people slowly over to it as it started to firm up and looked promising. And then we basically ran out of money right before we launched it into early access. So we had to get a loan for that. And then we launched into early access, but we launched it without a submarine. We launched like the most stripped down version of that game you can possibly imagine. And it was just barely making, we were basically breaking even at that point. It was just really touch and go. We had no money in the bank. It was just very like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen here. And we had this giant feature list of stuff we wanted to add. None of it was really clear. Like, are we doing co-op? Are we doing story? Is it more sciencey? Like more building? We didn't even have any buildings at that point. Like we had crafting, but we didn't have any base construction. So we had a small environment, a couple creatures, only one big creature, nothing that really, we had the stalkers, but nothing, we had the reefback, which is like a big kind of giant floating turtle creature. And then we had no sub. I don't think we had the Seamoth, although we may have the small submersible. That was probably in there, but I don't quite remember. And there was no story. So it's just crafting. We didn't even have survival elements. So we realized it was about 2 months into it. I remember realizing, holy crap, we need to cut almost everything off this roadmap and really focus on the things that this game is going to be really about. And we need to do it yesterday because we're going to go out of business if we don't. So we cut story, co-op, pretty much everything that was unknown. And we just said, let's focus. We started to notice that players were really loving the more scary aspects of the game. So we redirected towards that. We started putting in some big creatures in production. We got the Cyclops, the big sub in there, and those went over super well. And then that's when we started to get a little YouTube action. And then we moved that's when we did the base building. We added survival elements because I remember people saying, I remember one reviewer that just said, how dare a survival game not have food and water? And I was like, we're a survival game? Okay, I guess it fits the theme. So sure, that makes sense. And we just added it. And it was really just training wheels for the game. It was just to get players. We always knew from the beginning, I refused to ever tell the player what to do. And there's never going to be a quest log, never going to be something that says, go here now. We did breadcrumb out areas for players, but we did it in a subtle way. And so the survival elements really helped give players their footing because they didn't know what to do when you started playing the game. And then they would immediately start swimming towards the Aurora, which is their crashed ship, which is just a billboard on the horizon. So we knew that we had to do something with that billboard. So that was one of the early features, is we actually added this giant ship and it was explorable, so much work. So basically we just cut everything and then we started adding in the stuff that around the core. And that's when the YouTubers started really covering us. The game just took off. Like it was just one of those once in a lifetime, like Markiplier, Jacksepticeye, we had millions and millions, we had hundreds of millions of views within the space of just 3 to 4 months. It just literally blew up. And then it kind of started to tone down again. And that's when we realized we wanted to add a story and flesh out the game. Then we added all the other biomes. And then we kind of coasted into 1.0. And then we had another big launch. So that game, it was not easy, but it was pretty organic as far as what we were going to work on. And the game just had a life of its own. It kind of like seemed to guide us towards it, It was always what I wanted to be.
That's that's really cool. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't there's a theme here of wait, if you want to be really successful, have no idea what you're doing. That's what we're going to tell the future generations. No, I'm kidding.
You need to be open. You need to listen to your game.
Well, so actually, I have a question about that because especially when you're going into like, I mean, some people maybe worked in games aren't as sensitive to like cut features and things, and I always encourage people to be very we optimize for testing and throwing it out, or like try it and get rid of it if it doesn't work. That's the best thing you can do is
Yeah.
find out the mistake fast, or now we have terms like fast failure that tech is kind of taken on. But I'm curious, like as you were going into I'll just call it tightening the belt or sort of survival mode for
Yeah.
how did you build alignment with the team? Because, maybe, I mean, did you have people who did have, I'll just call it, say like a pet feature or something that they wished they could have and something like, oh, I was so excited to play this co-op and it was so much fun. Or I envision maybe the harder version is I imagine how cool this will be if you just give me a year to work on it or whatever. But like, how have you learned to build alignment in the team so that people know what you're working towards when part of what you're working towards is not knowing exactly what you're working towards? Like we have to listen, we have to be responsive. How do you build that sort of alignment and team spirit around that?
That's a good question. I mean, sometimes I think it's all about the right team, like the right team fit.
Yeah, I think you have to have trust.
Yeah. I think it worked better for us on Subnautica than it did on Moonbreaker for whatever reason. Maybe just, I don't know why. It just like, and part of it was that we were in survival mode for Subnautica. Like we were almost out of business so many times. There was no room. It was just stressful. It's like, you can't spend 6 months working on co-op. There's no time. You're like one of our 4 programmers. Get to work. We have things we have to ship or we're in deep trouble. Like the company will go out of business. So then after Subnautica, we have a lot more resources. So it's like, I guess maybe that's when you can relax a little bit. That's when people, open up those discussions and they're like, well, maybe we should try this or maybe, so I don't know. It might have just been a scarcity mindset. And I don't know.
Was that like communicate? I mean, you can just say like,
oh yeah,
no comment. Was that like communicated
no.
within the company? Like everybody's aware,
Oh yeah, super clear.
Yeah.
Hey everyone, we have to ship early access next month because we're out of money. Like we would say that.
And right. And then the question is, what do we cut? How do we fit it in the box? Yep. And that maybe is that like that's a team discussion, right? Because we need everybody's information to figure out what works.
Yep. But it was a pretty quick process. That was, I think, because it was so urgent. I remember I was actually on vacation the week that we did all the cuts and changes. And I remember realizing I just have to cancel my vacation because I suddenly realized we had to cut all this stuff and refocus. And it was about 3 days of meetings to get everyone aligned. And it was just brutal. It was just like all this stuff that we all wanted, all getting put on the back burner. Like this is all the backlog. We all know the backlog is like where things are actually cut, but you just tell everyone it's a backlog. And it makes it a lot easier because it is technically a backlog. You always could bring, and some of those things actually, the story did come back. So, that does happen. But it only took a couple of days of meetings to basically get everyone aligned. I mean, I think I tend to be a little more disruptive, as like the leader of the game. I tend to like have epiphanies or like new directions that like cause lots of problems for people. And in fact, at our last retreat, everyone surprised me by showing up with t-shirts with my face on it, but inside like a big hurricane, hurricane graphic art, because like I guess behind my back they're like, oh, we just had another Charlie hurricane, where like we have this new change in direction. Everyone has to like hurry up to like make it happen. But they meant it, like I think they meant it mostly nicely, because the hurricanes usually represent a very good change. Not always, but usually. So
I've always felt that way about hurricanes.
Really? Hey, it's supposed to be supportive.
Well, at least it'll be different.
It'll be different. Yeah. They don't always work. But Even on Subnautica, they didn't always work, but I think a lot of times they do. But what else can you do? Like you can either just, you can either not adapt to feedback and not adapt to reality. And of course, schedules are changing constantly. Programmers are telling you that something's really difficult. How it works. We had huge art problems on Moonbreaker, so we had to shift gears there. There's always something you have to respond, and then your players have lots to tell you. So, and the market keeps changing. So, and then sometimes your corporate structure changes at the same time, or key people leave or key people join. So it's a much more living system, I found, than authoritarian. At least that's what I like to say.
Yeah, I think we pretty early on, actually, when we were forming this, something I think about a lot is telling the story about how it was made is so much easier once you've made it, because the actual, we went to doing like open development with streams and things like that, just to let people know what was going on, with the attitude of, well, like you said, player feedback is huge. I would love to be able to get what we have into players' hands as soon as possible, but it's just not possible with the project we have with,
Yeah.
I mean, part of it's the constraint of the Ur-Quan Masters. I mean, yes, we could maybe give you Super Melee, and we did, or a version of it, right? But there's elements that it's hard to slice apart, and we've thought about ways of doing it, and that's a whole conversation. But there's an aspect of we've noticed with our community that's interesting, which is, I mean, I'm really glad you enjoyed the Ur-Quan Masters years ago. We have a community of people who are here for us and enjoyed it a long time ago. And something that came up in another conversation too was, they've had 30 years to think about what the future of this is going to be. And, I would, comparisons, everybody has played different games and whatever, but the Mass Effect team, yeah, it comes up a lot as like, well, they liked the Ur-Quan Masters, and this was their vision, their creative vision. And, so if you take like, this is their Ur-Quan Masters, here comes the sequel of what we're intending, here's what someone else intended. And they went off in kind of a different direction, or they took inspiration, as we all do. Because like, hey, we're creative people. We get inspired by creative works.
Yeah.
So, I'm curious, like, especially working project to project, but if you're working within a project and having to make changes, how would you communicate, especially with like an early access community, about, hey, we know you love this and you're attached to this vision. And I don't want to say we're not going to listen to you, but here's why we need to pivot. Like, what was learning about that in early access like? Or did you have all the experience you needed from natural selection?
Well, that never happens, because if the community would never be in love with something that was different than what we were in love with. Like it's literally never happened, as far as I know. Every once in a while you'll get, dissenting feedback, like the players who say they want a harpoon in Subnautica, that I wouldn't say the community was in love with harpoons. There were some threads that went up and people would like +1 it sometimes, but it was not like a overwhelming, it wasn't a general sentiment. So I kind of view it like, when your community tells you something, you don't have to listen, obviously, but the real benefit of feedback is actually, it's not even the feedback, it's the process of seeing somebody else, being able to experience your game through fresh eyes and through a different perspective. It allows you to see what you have, and it's very like metaphysical. Like you have to release it, you have to see someone else play your game for you to understand what game you're making. I don't know why that is, but to me, it seems that way. So it allows you to see your own game. That's really all it is. And so you're not taking a vote and like whatever features people want the most, that goes in, or the squeakiest wheel gets the grease. It's not that at all. It's just, you get to see your own game. You get to get their perspective. Not even their perspective, you get your own perspective, but you need somebody else to play it for you to get it.
Right, because you can intend them to have some experience, but that doesn't mean that's going to be the experience they're about to have. And especially something open-ended, right? Like you said, there's sort of these stories that can happen in different sequences. Like you don't really know until you see someone do it, and someone might get attached to the most. You thought it was something in the corner, and there they are, fascinated by it, and you put no effort into it, and you go, wow, this player really loves this thing I put no effort into. Maybe there's something here, right?
Well, the thing that gets you to start a project, you haven't quite put your finger on it necessarily, right? Like for me, I always start with music, and there's something about a piece of music that allows me to feel certain emotions that get me really excited, fills me with creative energy. But the exact like emotion from that music, I don't know exactly what that is necessarily. And for Subnautica, it was I mean that the whole terror and possibility of underwater, that was really the core of it. And I didn't know that exactly, but I was being guided by it, but I didn't know if it was more like visual beauty, if it was more exploration, if it was more like discovery. Is it terror? Is it horror? Is it the unknown? These are all things that are all really close, but the game that you make, like those are really important differences, all those adjectives. So but by showing it to players, I could see that the thing that really motivated me was the unknown, kind of the thrill, and to an extent, the terror. Those things were all, it was that mix of all those things. So I don't know, I guess to me, it's like really about the community helping you see, what motivates you, I guess. And some of this stuff, I don't know if you guys know the Creative Act by Rick Rubin, this new book that came out like a year ago. It's like my favorite book of all time now. And he talks about a lot of this stuff. He talks about creativity in general. He's been a really famous music producer for a long time. He's worked with like all the big artists, like yeah, across many genres. But he wrote a book about creativity in general. And this stuff is like, it's about painting, it's about video games, it's about music, writing. It's all the same kind of idea. And he talks about feedback and in this kind of metaphysical way, which is that it lets you see, it gives you the perspective you need on what you're making. It's not about them telling you what they think. Very weird.
Well, I mean, yes and no. This is games will always be my number one, but my number two is live performance.
Okay.
And so, but what's the difference between live performance and a movie? I mean, a lot of differences, but really, truly, crucially at the top of the heap is exactly what you're talking about, which is if there was no one there to watch, what's the point?
Yeah.
It's like it's a whole other layer of, if a tree falls in a forest, etc. But the energy, and I used to teach these dance classes, and I would tell people my least favorite phrase in the world is dance like no one's watching, because that's so dismissive. Dance like everyone's watching, because you know what? People I've learned about like live audiences and people in general, and like as you're talking about community interactions, and I think, there's a whole argument to have about does the internet make us hostile and things like that. But people are supportive and they want to see you succeed. And I think like even your story about Sandy Hook and, what I want to create is I want to clap for people and I want people to clap for me, and I want to be able to cheer people on. And that's our default state is not you watch someone get it. You go to, I mean, I see a lot of live performances. I was just in a live performance this last weekend, and it's like people are excited that you're there and you're excited that they're there, and you'll learn, like, I don't know what the best part of my performance is until after I hear the audience. I go, oh, it was that one thing. I
Yeah.
didn't even mean to do it. Maybe it was an accident, whatever.
Right.
And that opening yourself up to the joy of not needing to have all the answers and getting, for me, like learning is a big motivation.
Right.
Like what you said speaks to me a lot and kind of the way I work by default. I don't know if everybody works the same way, like I'm sure there's different ways to be creative. Um, but I've found like, especially on this project too, especially for new people, and to hear the stories about how great games were made. And we got to tell some stories about that today, which was awesome.
Yeah.
It's like, it's so nice to be able to share the stories and say, actually, we didn't know what we were doing and we learned it along the way. And it's not about humility or anything like that, although that helps, but it's more like, you can do it too. You just have to give yourself permission to start learning. And I like learning is kind of the key word. So don't worry, with our collaborators in this project, there's some people I've told almost verbatim, please don't try to get it right. If you try to get it right, then you'll never figure out what right is, because how do you know, like, who am I to know what right is? I don't know. I have to try it. I have to play it. I have to watch someone else play it,
But if you
and
try to get
that's
something
free.
right, you don't even start,
Yeah.
So, and if you don't start, you can't iterate and you can't learn. So the most important thing is to actually start. And if you try to figure it all out first, oh my gosh, it's so daunting. You're thinking about
Yeah, I'm scared thinking about it.
oh my God, budgets, teams, technical problems, art problems, like marketing, like the actual market, trying to figure out how do you fit in the market. It's like you can basically just like put all that stuff on hold and think about like what do you want? What do you care about yourself? What do you and Rick actually talks about success and how you can define success like 100% for how you feel the moment before you release your work to the world. And that is actually success. If you feel like you made the thing that you wanted to make and you're happy with it and you've put what you wanted to, like your best work into it that you're capable of at that moment, then that's success. And regardless, it doesn't matter what the ratings are or the sales or public response or like critical consensus. What he's basically saying is if you don't feel like you're proud of what you made each time, but also actually releasing it, you can't just sit there forever and just try to polish it forever and just until it's like perfect or whatever. You have to actually release it, because if you don't release it, you don't move on to the next chapter. And he views your life's work as many chapters. And if you focus too much on one, you basically become paralyzed and you never process it and you never learn and you never start a new project. And if you view the public reception of your work as success or failure, as soon as you have a failure, you think of yourself as a failure and you'll stop making stuff, which is the only real failure. So you have to just make something that you care about, what you control, release it, move on the next. Make it till you're proud of it, release it, move on the next. Like that's a creative life, right? That's the only way anyone can be creative.
Blame others for your failures.
Creatively.
That's step 5. Usually a publisher, if there's a publisher in there, just blame.
Yeah, just or throw QA under the bus. That's always a good idea.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah.
But well, no, I really I can appreciate that a lot. And I don't know, these days I draw a lot of inspiration from dance. And for me, I'm a perfectionist when I'm in the studio. If I'm in front of other people and they're watching me, I'm just me. I can't be a perfectionist for other people. I can only be it for me. And then when it's time to show someone something, then I just show them whatever it is that I have, and it's like, whatever I have is good enough. Is it going to be different tomorrow? Is it going to be different in a year? Absolutely. But that's fun. And so the pressure you're talking about is pretty interesting. And I'd say, like, very honestly, I've talked to other people about this too, that we're following up a game that has someone like you coming in, and like, which it really means a lot to me and even more to Fred, because I didn't even work on it. But it's like, hey, you say this game affected you a lot and you love it, and you've spent hours at your door playing it. I'm like, wow, that's humbling. For me, I'm just excited if somebody knows anything I worked on, like, oh, you played that? Cool. I don't even care if you hated it. I'm just glad you played it. Good for you. I sort of have not an I don't want to say low ego, but for me, I'm just happy that somebody had an experience with anything I did, whatever creative work it is. But something like that is interesting for us is there's a lot of people who did have a positive experience with the game, and it's been 30 years and we've all become different people. I'm a different person. You're a different person. Fred's a different person. Technology's changed. There's been this huge time gap. And, you could talk about heartless, IP reboots and Hollywood or whatever, and have a cynical view of that. And I'd say that's not what we're doing. We're not like, time to go mine some IP. It's like, no, let's do the thing, just as you were talking about. This is the thing we want to do, that we want to be proud of, and show it to everyone. I don't want to ask the question, how do you manage expectations? But there's sort of a like built-in high mark up there that, like, oh wow, there was this really good game that a lot of people really liked, and we want to hit it again. Oh gosh, that's like stressful, because that's way up here and we're just humble. I'm just a humble game maker. How would you relate to that? Or I mean, I could even ask you the silly question, which is, well, how would you approach a sequel to this game? Do our job for us or send us your fee. I'm kidding. But
No.
yeah, like, have you ever like dealt with that sort of like pressures of something that existed a long time ago? I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how you approach that, given the healthy mindset you're talking about.
I mean, we didn't do it. I don't know if maybe it's a similar level for Natural Selection 1 and 2. Like we're not talking about Skylanders 2, but or actually, did Skylanders have a 2, or was it just ongoing forever? I want to talk about
Nice.
Skylanders at some point.
We can talk about Skylanders. Skylanders had what, 5 games? Is that right?
No, more 6, I think.
Six? Yeah,
Do you think?
We Fred and I worked on 3 Skylanders. Fred worked on 4 of them. I worked on 3 of them.
Okay. Well, so were they actually like sequels? Was it Skylanders 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Or was it like something else? No.
Not really, but I mean, the important conceit of the game was that the toys were backwards compatible. So in a sense, they had to be related.
Yeah, they're more like Pokemon, where it's a recurring Scooby-Doo villain moment. Here's a new story and a new villain, and or the same old villain or whatever. They're back to cause more havoc. So it was revisit the world you were in.
Right. Well, so I'll put a pin in that one for a second, but like, so Natural Selection 2 was a sequel to 1, and the only way we could, we couldn't change that much with that game. There were some things we wanted to change design-wise, but we couldn't change too much, or else we would like alienate our audience. So we were able to, now with hindsight, I can see that we were able to grow the audience, deliver a pretty great sequel. It wasn't perfect, but pretty good. And we changed maybe a hair too much, I don't know, but we were just open with the community from day one. So that helped us a lot to like not surprise people too much, and we could see when we've gone too far, or where we were right on track. So I think open development is the way to go. I think we're still learning that. There's a new Subnautica game that the public now knows. That's all they know, is that there's another Subnautica game coming. That's all I'm going to say about it. But I do think that open development is a way to basically, not reduce expectations, but just to like engage the community, so that where you're off track way before it's already settled. So that's pretty much my answer. Like, be open. But I just like to be open about everything. That's my default state. And anytime I have to keep something secret, I just hate it. So I'd rather just be open and just say something. And if people don't like it, it's nice to know. But that doesn't mean that we're going to listen. But we might. Hopefully, we can listen.
Well, but like you said, you'll learn. It's not necessarily, ask people what they want, do what they say they want, but you'll see a trend. There's a pattern, or someone might say something. This did actually happen in development recently. You'll get an idea from left field because someone says something that's just, as stated, maybe inane or wouldn't work or doesn't fit, not to put anybody down, but like, wait, I see a spark of something, And so for me, it's like letting myself be inspired. It's hard to do that. I've said this to the team I'm working with, like, I don't like to work alone. That doesn't mean I don't like being left alone. I do, but I need creative inputs to help me with the outputs, and people coming in, like you said, fresh eyes is a big one, but people coming in from left field, people coming in sort of like, there's someone who could have played Ur-Quan Masters, and for them, Fwifo is their favorite thing in the world. And they're going to ask over and over, what is Fwifo doing? What is Fwifo doing? And the sequel, what's he doing? And that's like a totally valid question.
That's super important to know. That wasn't on my radar, but that's fantastic.
It is now. I'm sorry, I've planted the seed, but I'd feel really bad if we didn't answer what Fwifo is doing, because he's like the mascot of the game in some ways. But the thing that comes up is, it's not even that we have to answer that question, right? We probably will, but what's more important, or the valuable feedback there, is, someone cares about something, and someone in aggregate, especially, people really care about this thing, or we can use this to not answer their question and instead go a different direction that will delight them in a different way because they're curious about whatever it was. So, it's kind of like you said, being open is the best. It doesn't mean listen to everybody, or sort of design by committee, something like that.
No, nothing like that.
It's kind of new for us, honestly, because when I worked at Activision, if you want to talk about Skylanders, we can talk about that I worked on a lot, and I can talk about more. Fred will remain
I want to ask you
as quiet as he needs to, but
I want to have one follow-up point, which is, a lot of times it's not even what they say, but it's what they don't say. Because so many times we've worked on something, and it's just like, no one really says anything about that asset or that idea. And you're like, oh, okay, it's not that it's bad. It's just they don't really care. So why would you work on something that they don't really care about when you work on something that they love? Like, I feel like we had that experience with Moonbreaker a bit. I'm sure we had it on Subnautica. where you fall in love with some idea and it's like crickets, you know?
Yeah.
It's not even like they're saying anything bad about it. It's just they don't say anything. You're like, oh, okay, well, that's probably not the direction we should go, or at least it's not a well-formed idea yet. Maybe we need to tweak it. But I think it's interesting that, given your history, it's kind of like your Skylanders is our Subnautica, right? Like, and maybe like my natural selection is your Ur-Quan Masters. It's like the smaller game, the one you started with, the one that has fans just drooling, like fewer fans, but they just are absolutely ravenous about the game. They're so diehard. And obviously, I'm sure the Skylanders IP, you guys don't, own. But it's interesting that you're not, you're coming back to basics in a way. Like you're coming back home, and I think that's a really interesting choice. I'd love to hear why you're not moving the Skylanders-ish direction and you're kind of going back.
Well, for me, uh, working for Activision is quite a bit different than what we're doing from what we're doing right now. And it's
Yeah.
just the massive corporate culture that can solve anything by throwing money at it. And, including just hiring a gazillion people to work on Call of Duty every year just to finish it. And for the last 20 years with Activision, I was a studio head, but I got to do development work up until like the last 6 or 7 years, where I was pretty removed from it, and I just missed it. I missed the development
Programming.
and
You miss programming?
programming. Yeah, actually, just being part of the development, kind of. Yeah, but programming too. And I was doing stuff on the side, but I'm so happy programming again. So
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Isn't that weird? It's such a weird cycle. It's how it always works, right? Make something that you love, it grows and grows and grows, it gets bought, and now you're like in a role where you're like removed from it, and then you start over and you start something new, and then you love it, and then you get bought. It's gonna keep going.
let's see how that works
Are
out.
you buying? No.
Yeah,
exactly.
We're selling if you're buying. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, for me, I'll just briefly throw in my version of the answer, which is actually left in the middle of I think the last Imagineers was the last Skylanders game, right?
Imaginators, yeah.
Yeah, so I left in the middle of development of that, and I could write a book about that. But the short version is, I was done making games after what had happened. Trap Team pivoting to Imagineers was really difficult for me, and kind of a way Fred was talking about, which is I used to be a team lead. We had a technology at Toys for Bob that I really loved and believed in, and as far as I'm concerned, was a linchpin in the success of Skylanders. If we didn't have that technology that helped us make games, we never would have gotten Skylanders to begin with. So Activision pretty much had us move on to another technology, and so we lost our technology. And Fred made that technology, right? He's sitting here, so I'm not just like talking up someone who's not in the room, but it's like, Fred worked on that technology and I really believed in it. I gave a terrible presentation at a GDC event about it. Not because the not because the technology is bad, but because I did a bad job presenting it. If I want to go back and do anything, it's that, or redo anything. So, we had this technology that really enabled us to be creative. And to your point about being open and trying things, it's like you work, in the Activision machine, you can talk about how much wiggle room there is to even try anything when you have to just do a sequel. And that's some of the mindset. But fundamentally, I had a technology that I really believed in. And in losing the technology, I lost two things that I realized were really important to me at like any job I work, which is one, I have to love the tools I'm working with, in some way, and have a relationship with them and have a relationship with someone who can even make them better. And here I am working with Fred doing that. And that's really cool. So that's part of why we're back together. And then the other one was I lost my team. I used to be a team lead, and I'm one of the strange people who actually likes management a lot, like the management part of it, like the boring
Right.
parts. and I like growing people, and I like I learned later in life I love educating, and that's why I got into teaching once I left my job, teaching adults. And so I loved that. And because of the restructure around the new technology, I was just an individual contributor again. And so I tried to work on like the UI of the tool so I could feel like I was helping the designers do something. And so I became more of an engineer and less of a designer, and just tried to like, I did some UI design, right? Because I wanted to improve the tools we had to use. But it wasn't the same. I really missed management. And so I kind of, after seeing this sort of my, I don't want to say irrational, but my very emotional state, to go from Skylanders was this huge success. Now here's your punishment. Just felt that was just
Oh,
dissociative to me. Like, wait, why? If we were so successful and we made our parent company so much money, why are we losing access to the things that made it successful in the first place? It's just so weird. And that was my, I don't want to say light bulb moment, but I started working in games when I was 18. You're paid in games. I didn't go to college or anything. And like, I love games, and I made mods before that.
awesome.
And so that was really my moment where I'm just like, hey, this industry is kind of not for me. I don't want to do it this way. Right. And I left and I said, I'll only work in games again if I get to like help be in charge and do things a little bit differently, and help manage again and get those things back. And so Fred and
Right.
Paul approached me. And that was maybe, I mean, most the dramatic version of that story I've ever told. I don't think I've told that story in full, but this feels like the right environment. And I was just like, yeah, I'm not working in games anymore because I could go be appreciated somewhere else instead of like make a parent company a bunch of money and then lose access to all of the stuff that I like. So
Stuff
I
you liked
left
was
for a
more on the
while.
management side, right? Because then you got essentially demoted to like an individual contributor, which is interesting because usually it goes the other way.
It's usually the opposite. Yeah, I'm like I said, I'm one of the strange ones. I actually would
Yeah,
love doing that.
that's
And I
awesome.
found a job in between what I'm doing now and back then, a job which I loved, doing project
Yeah,
management. I didn't know I would love to be a project manager, but I
awesome.
did. I got to work with like 40 engineers, and I'm used to
Yeah.
working with engineers. And it's like, oh, this is so cool. I can help them succeed, and I don't have to type a line of code. I wound up doing some, programming just to like build tools for other project
Right.
managers just for fun. But yeah, it was the sort of the lack of control, the like loss of, I don't want to call it responsibility, but I'll just say the thing that I loved, which was working with
Yeah.
managing and teaching other people. And, we're a tiny team, and I'm not anybody's manager because we're so small, but
Right.
I can see a future of that. And with our sort of open development, I can like teach other people how to use the tools Fred's making, and that's fun. And so I get to recreate some of that. So yeah, that was maybe more
Awesome.
long-winded, but
No, I mean, I work with plenty of people who are like the same, right? They're like production people and, executive people, and that's their happy place, right? They want to be in that super high leverage, kind of, I guess like, I'm not sure, pro-social or like a collaborative kind of way that's how they want to work. And
yeah.
I realized I just read this book called The Six Types of Working Genius, which kind of, it's actually pretty fascinating, and it kind of lays out a like a taxonomy of different personality types, and it kind of shows you that some people are like that and some people are more on the pure creative. They basically just want to do the creative side. Some people have like, they want to invent but they don't want to they don't want to actually build it, they just want to ideate it. It's neat, it's a neat way to think of it, and I think I could see where you would fit in there, because it would be basically, you're going to be unhappy if you're not helping people, which is the more you fight it, the more unhappy you're going to get.
Yeah,
So
the nice thing is I've learned like, especially I have more, this was also new to me again. Didn't go to college, just went right into game development. Like I can get my nutrients from a plant. I can get those nutrients from multiple places, right? So I can get my creativity outside of work. I can get my teaching outside of work. I can feed those parts, but I realized how important that was to me. And so of course it's like, it's kind of like steering a ship, it wobbles, but the
mhm.
closer I can get towards exactly what I want, even if it changes and I learn as I go, for me, a lot of it's learning, the better, this very small team that we're working on now, yeah, I'm not managing anybody. I'm not necessarily in that position, but what I like about it is kind of to your point, it's, well, I get to work together with people. We're small enough that it's not like I have to deal with someone above me, someone below me. There's no middle management, none of that. And so I get the joy of, well, let's do something together and let's find out together. And I don't know. That's a not to get too sentimental about it, but like that's a big part of what motivates me is like, what's the point of anything unless there's somebody else to do it with?
Right. Oh, I love that. That's awesome.
I rephrase that as it's somebody else to do something to.
And that's why Fred did all the sounds for the Pakunk Fury.
Oh, loser, baby.
Yeah, exactly. That was all one take.
Right? Did you actually, was that your voice?
Yeah.
No
Yeah.
kidding. Oh, that's so cool. Wow. We
Yeah.
always have elaborate like theories about, oh, after he says baby 3 times in a row, like he'll surely resurrect, you know, or
Yeah.
like some random crackpot theories. I'm trying to think if I ever stole anything. Oh, actually, I'm sure we did.
Were you taking, I mean, it's open source. You could have taken parts of the
No, I
Ur-Quan
mean just
Masters stuff.
thematically. I'm sure I know the Vux. The Vux actually showed up. The Vux slime recently showed up in Moonbreaker. There's a unit that it's actually really cool. It's like a unit that has like all these extra like globs on it, and each glob is +1 health on it, but it can transfer them to someone else, and they actually it also slows it down. So each one is +1 health, -1 speed, but it can transfer them to other units. And then you can also detonate them if you hit it with a laser. So it was actually very much Vux. In fact, I wrote a design blog on it.
I was gonna say, I feel like I read a post about this. This
I
sounds
did.
really familiar.
Yeah, I wrote a Reddit post on this a while ago about the Vuxification of Moonbreaker. So that was really cool. I'm trying to think of anything else. We did have the Gorge in NS2. I think not. Or no, I guess NS1 and NS2, I believe, could slow you down with its webs. Kind of a similar idea. Trying to think what else. I know there's others. There have to be others. I just can't really think of them all right now. I'm sure we've tried resurrection mechanics like the Bakunk before. Never done like a random teleport like the Erelulale. But I don't know how these words are pronounced, by the way. We just had our own way of saying them. I've never talked to someone that would actually know.
That's part of the fun.
It
Yeah,
is part of the fun.
it is part of the fun. Yeah.
I heard you say one. What did you say? You said one that you said Thradash.
Third Ash?
How did you pronounce it?
I call them Third Ash.
Thradash. I think we call it Thradish.
Yeah, I've heard that more, but you know what? We're all just as wrong as everybody else. It's fun.
Really?
I mean,
I
if
don't
you
think
want to
that's
know the
wrong.
real way it's supposed to be pronounced, it's sort of like, I don't know. Well, we worked at Toys for Bob, and the question we always got was, who's Bob? And the fun part is there was kind of no answer to that question, and that was the joke.
Right. Why was it called Toys for Bob?
Hi, Fred. Why was it called Toys for Bob?
we don't really have a good answer to that, but we have discovered that it is always a source of inquiry.
So yeah, that's cool.
So we've
Mark?
made up random answers over the years.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's sort of like you sow these seeds, I mean, talk about world building. We have world building just around the studio name that we used to be at. So there you go. Now we have mysteries everywhere. We just confuse everyone as we go.
So where can I get my hands on this co-op library? This sounds really cool.
You can get it from me.
Yeah. Is it not available online? It's a need to know.
A month's old version is. So the thing about it is there's no graphics or sound to it. It's just game design. And so recently we have just connected it to what we call a viewer. So this is you design your sort of physicsy based multiplayer gameplay in the thing I build, and then it needs a viewer companion that views what you've built. And so we've just sort of barely completed a viewer in Godot, which was sort of the whole Unity
We
thing.
all were watching Godot videos for a few months there.
Yeah. So we now have a competent viewer to go along with the.
That's awesome. So is it world state as well? I'm imagining there must be some world state in there.
Yeah, it's
How do you want to go? Do you want to do the short version or the long version, Fred? I've been here for a while.
Yes, the game has state, pretty much how you program it, because it's effectively a programming language. Although it's all done with visuals as opposed to typing. Um, and depending on how you declare your properties, that determines whether they get saved or et cetera, et cetera. So it's all basically done with property markup, and then object how you define the scaffolding of your objects. So I know that's a very unsatisfactory explanation, but Dan as the user might be able to add some crucial
Yeah.
color there. But
Yeah, I mean, if you want the short and simple answer, which doesn't really answer anything, or maybe Fred will say, well, caveat it. It does whatever you want it to. So if you can have an entity or some object that you can stuff information into, let's say numbers, whatever, that'll stick around however long you want. Fred
Mhm.
provides a few more things that I use that are very useful, like a physics world. So if I want to create let's use pinball. It's a great example. Pinball. If I want to make a pinball table with some mesh and say, okay, well, here's a ball. It's shaped like a sphere. Here's a mesh. It's supposed to bump off these things. Here's my flippers or whatever. I can create a world that has all those elements in it. If I want to remember, like, how many matches have I played, how many balls are left, these sort of ephemeral bits of information, they're just properties that sit on an object, but it's up to me, and I really mean this, it's up to me to figure out how I want that to work. Fred doesn't provide there's no magic state holding entity that Fred defines. It's my decision, and I've made my own structures for that. So it's a little bit like the metaphor that Fred uses a lot, which I like to think I like too, is it's like being given a big pile of atoms or elements and
Mhm.
then being told to assemble a person. It's a little confusing and hard to think about. You can imagine how to like make water out of, hydrogen and oxygen, right? Okay, but how do I get all the way up to a person? That's kind of confusing. I don't know how to do that. So part of the learning curve with it, and I do think this is really the only hard part that's hard to grasp until you really get into it, is, oh, I can make more complex chemical compounds. I'm trying to figure out how to get a person, but what I need to just understand is, wait a minute, a person is just made up of a bunch of little atoms, and it's up to me to assemble it. But that's that's a stretch until you get your hands on it. When you get your hands on it and do it, it's actually, I mean, we have some community people who have successfully built stuff with it. Some people have struggled. Well, I'm as with everything we do, I'm sure it can be improved. I know it can be improved and made
Yep.
simpler, and
For
our
sure.
documentation can be better and everything like that. But it doesn't dictate what type of game you should make, which is one of the features I like. It's just, here's a physics space, do whatever you want with it, you figure it out, and for like Children of Infinity, it has a lot of physics spaces. There's a hyperspace space, there's an interplanetary space, there's a super melee space, and there's different rules and different gameplay in each one of those spaces. The engine didn't define any of that. I just have like a rigid body, which lets me bounce two objects together and give something velocity. It's up to me to say, well, when I get input that says forward, that means thrust. When I get input that says left, that means turn. That could mean very different things in very different gameplay spaces. So I don't know if that helps answer the question, or is just like, now I'm even more confused.
Kind
What's
of.
going on?
I mean, it sounds like it's like it's building blocks for serializing world state and managing like a peer-to-peer environment. So you don't have to worry about sending objects across the net. Is that kind
yeah, it's just input. Yeah, there's no object serialization. It's just sending input to the other players.
Oh, okay.
I
Oh,
never
I
think
didn't
about
realize that.
networking at all.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't
Yeah.
realize that. Okay.
It's I make gameplay and I make it work. And then yeah, Fred can talk. If you want to talk engineering talk, you got to talk to Fred. But
Okay.
I never think about, am I doing anything that's network safe? I just make the
Everything is network. The language is designed so everything is network safe.
yeah.
So then I guess the only trick would be there's probably certain genres that you probably wouldn't want, like you probably wouldn't want to make a shooter with this framework because I imagine there's latency on the input. No?
No, no
No,
latency.
Really interesting. So
It's
it's the
Fred
it's
can talk
predict
about it. Yeah.
rollback. So it's completely deterministic.
Mhm.
So you only have to have input traded among players. And each client is running at 60 frames per second, and they're predicting what the other clients will do. And they're doing their thing at 60 frames a second
Yep.
and sending their input at 60 frames a second. So when a misprediction happens, like when you
Yep.
say, I think this guy's going to turn right here, but he went straight,
Yep.
then you hear about that maybe a few milliseconds later, and
Yep.
you roll back and fast forward uh,
Yep.
to the right state.
And you're saying you don't have to, when you're building something with it, you don't have to think about networking at all?
Yeah.
Like at all? Like
Uh,
even for doing user interfaces and
well, I mean, you have to think about the fact that there's another player who's experiencing the same world you are, and what sort of allowances you need to make for that.
right.
Like like you there's always the interesting thing about, well, I can't really pause now when I go into a menu because
Yep.
because the other players don't want to
Yeah.
experience my pause.
Yep.
Um,
But besides that, you don't think about multiplayer?
yeah,
Wow.
Right. Yeah, it's a big freedom and a big improvement on what we had at Toys for Bob, but it's just a design question at that point. Like
Yeah.
using Super Melee as example, right now I can run Super Melee in like 10 different modes or something. There's the straight up PvP, you remember, 1v1, and that just says each player is an opponent. Your missiles should hit each other. Yes.
Yep.
Then there's cooperative Super Melee, which is it's you against whatever AI. You're on the same team. Then there's free for all with N
Yep.
players and whatever. And there's no, I don't think about the networking when I do that at all. There's no thinking
Wow.
about it.
That's
It's just
awesome.
what's the design rule? The design rule is, oh, in this mode, here's a new player. And that means blah, whatever, your
Yep.
enemies, your friends, your sort of friends.
I love that. I mean, that would be, we've really struggled with, we've created a couple prototypes a while ago about, co-op prototypes. We did like a space game prototype. We did, I can't even remember all of them we did quite a few. And man, is prototyping co-op a pain in the butt. Like it's too, like the prototype part means you want to go as fast as possible, but the co-op part means you have to manage networking and like think about serialization and stuff all the time. In our experience with like all the engines we've tried, so if you've solved that where you can just basically it's like making a single player game that can work with multiplayer, that would be fantastic. Even if it only worked as a prototype, that would also be amazing. But it sounds like you have it working.
yeah, I haven't worked. We
Yeah.
have it working, and arbitrary drop in. It's just part of the you just join whenever and you're in the game. That's the only time we send state is when you request to drop in from the
Right.
host. So
Yep.
then you get a snapshot of where he is. And
Yep.
then from then on it's just inputs.
Well,
Yeah.
but then
So
it has to send you some state for like where objects are, right? Just so you can draw them, right?
Just no, just when you drop in. Just when you drop in, you get the state from the host. And then from there,
Entire world state.
uh yeah, basically the entire world state.
Ah.
And then from there, it's just sending inputs.
Okay, so you wouldn't use it for like an MMO with a giant world. You'd
Probably not.
Okay, unless you want
Um,
like a 200 megabyte join.
yeah, or
or we'd have
have
other
to get
solutions for that.
you'd
Yeah.
have to get smart
Okay.
about.
Yeah.
You don't need the entire world state because you're only dropping in here.
Right.
There's a local world state that you can get at this point.
So
Um,
then if the world changes a lot on the host, I know you said it's peer to peer. If it changes a lot on either side, does
there's no
it?
sides because
Oh,
it's peer to peer. Every client is running the exact same.
okay. So it's like an RTS.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
and only input comes across. So
yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
if it says I fired, and you get that a little bit later than I said I get that, it doesn't
Yep.
matter. There's a rollback, and the
Okay.
universe continues as if what it thought
Gotcha.
had happened has happened. There's quirks in there, like we haven't dealt with some of the potentially ickier parts of rolling back. So if you imagine an explosion happened because a missile we think, based on input, you fired a missile, right?
Yep.
But then, oh, wait a minute, someone rolls back and it needs to happen again, or it happened at a different time, whatever the decision is. Maybe this is all right, I'm realizing this is a bad example, but an
Well,
explosion. Yeah, go ahead.
it's not really any different from any networking solution where corrections have to happen, to the state, whether they're corrections coming from the server or whether they're corrections coming from each client saying, oops, I mispredicted that didn't actually happen. But the corrections are not sent over the network, just the input is. And
Yep.
when
Gotcha.
each client realizes, oops, I mispredicted what that guy was going to do, so I need to go back in time,
Yep.
apply his input, and then go forward in time from there.
Yep. So you can have out of syncs, I guess, is the downside if you don't write your code right.
Yes, that's very difficult.
Oh, it's very hard. It's difficult.
It's very difficult to get it right, especially if you're trying to emulate a physics. I mean, if you're trying to support a reasonable physics simulation.
And you probably, yeah, that's right. And you probably wouldn't want to be playing like a competitive shooter because like the host is going to have a latency advantage over you.
No, there's no.
Oh no, so you're right. Oh no, everyone's
you all suffer together. No,
but you're not going to see. Okay, that's right.
So like just as a sort of topical example, like Overwatch uses similar technology. They have slightly more sophisticated thing for like your player view versus the world state. And I think they handle things a little bit differently there. But that's why if you play Overwatch, you're like, hey, why did I die? I didn't see that missile hit me. Sometimes if your latency is bad, that'll happen because you did get hit, you didn't realize it, and then whoop, when you get caught up, it's like, actually you did, sorry. But it works very, very well. I mean, we've tested it. Again, we always need to test more, but like Fred, we've tested it with 4 players, and we did 4 players from very disparate geographies. I think I saw your little Ultra Bee jump into our chat here. They're in New Zealand, and like that's going to be pretty bad latency, right? And it ran pretty well. I mean, there were hiccups occasionally where you'd see a little jitter, but that's no different from any network latency issue in anything. I think what you asked earlier, like, would you want to do an MMO with it? Probably not. Would you do a fighting game? Would you do a first person shooter? Yeah.
Okay, so I can think of, I just know there's a trade-off here, and I'm just trying to remember. Okay, here's a trade-off. So if you have if one person has like a terrible connection to everyone else, that's going to drag down the performance for everyone, right?
It doesn't drag down the performance. It just drags it adds discontinuities.
Yeah,
and the thing is that so rollbacks are happening all the time because people are thrashing their keys, but the audio visual discontinuities are not one-to-one with the rollbacks. I mean, yes, this guy turned left here instead of going straight, and so maybe you'll see that, but nothing actually interacted with him when he did that. So there's nothing really to resolve other than the fact that he's not in the position you thought he was, kind of. There's obviously you can do warping, you can get more sophisticated. Because the view is really a slave of the simulation engine. So and the view can be as complicated as you want, and you can have asymmetric gameplay. What was I going to say about the view? Oh, just that you can get as complicated as you want on the view side to represent or to smooth some of the at least the visual discontinuities. And there's tricks you can do, like when something is verified. So everything is predicted to start. And then when you've heard from everybody else, okay, this is now verified because I've heard from everybody. They've all heard from me. So this particular event is a verified event now. And so you could choose on the view side to say, well, I'm only going to start like explosion sounds when everything is verified,
Hmm.
because I know it can't be rolled back to something different. Um, and so you can sort of mitigate discontinuities there. The thing that happens though is like if you do have a guy who has a super long ping time, then things don't get verified for a long time, and
Right.
it can feel or sound laggy depending on how you make those decisions. But
And as the player count continues to grow, basically the highest ping is going to like hurt everyone. And then of course there's more players, they can tend to have more overlap depending on the size of the environment. So maybe there's at some point it's probably not meant for like 50 people or
yeah, probably not.
yeah.
But um, if everybody is waiting on one player who's particularly slow, when his input comes in, there's probably some input from other people that's also come in that's later in
Yeah.
time, and
Hmm.
that gets kind of incorporated for free
Right. Right.
because
Right.
you've rolled back for him. You get
Yeah.
input that comes in from these other people, and as you go forward, it's like
Right.
I don't have to roll back for these guys.
Yep. Gotcha. And so this is all engine agnostic, so you can stick it in Unity or Godot or Unreal or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, and cross-platform PS4, PS5, PS20.
Are those engines? They're not all deterministic though, like they're physics.
No, they just have to use this one little core of the game simulation. So
Yeah,
if they,
we don't count on them. Like right now, we are using the Godot viewer, and we don't count on it to do. I mean, I use its physics only for kind of weird, weird benign things, but I don't count on one
Particles or something.
Godot. I don't use Godot to talk to another Godot peer at all.
But it seems like you have to have your own physics built in to your
yeah,
engine.
so
It is the
that's what
physics,
that
yeah.
kernel is
Okay. Oh,
it's a
gotcha. Okay. Gotcha.
physics simulator um, that you can script basically. And it's not meant to replace like C# in Unity. It's supposed to be lower level than that.
Okay.
So the C#
Hmm.
sort of consumes that kernel of gameplay and makes decisions about how it's going to represent it to the person playing on the device.
Right. Very cool. Well, I'd love to check it out. It sounds pretty neat.
Yeah, I
We
mean,
think it's kind of neat.
Yeah.
yeah, we're biased, but you know, like
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
used to, people would watch me work with it all day on stream, you know, or not all day, but
Uh-huh.
for a few hours, a couple times a week, and you know, like seriously, I mean it. Happy to give you a demo sometime. I don't know.
Yeah.
Now might not be the right time, but you
Maybe
know,
not
at
now,
some
but
point, be happy
yeah.
to, and you know, show you what other people have made. You know, really, it is like I don't know. If we think it's neat, we're making the whole game with it. You know, you brought up like
Awesome.
Godot and that sort of kerfuffle. The interesting thing is we just that was sort of like I don't know how to describe that. We didn't know anything about Unity. We just
Mhm.
didn't want to use Unity before
Uh,
anything. We didn't know all the stuff that happened with Unity. We were not aware of it. This was just a matter of like when Fred and I were talking about, hey, you know, we probably need to pivot our view solution. What should we do? And I brought up, you know, I'm like, well, we're trying to keep all our stuff, you know, open sourceable and being able to, you know,
awesome.
hey, it's really helpful to be able to own everything we're using, or at least be able to relicense, you know, reuse license or freely, you know, freely give away things as we see fit. And so Godot was just a good shoe in for that. But before that, I mean, the first thing I think Fred, you tried doing was
Yeah,
also Unity viewer.
I had it running in Unity early on, just because that's what I had on my computer. But
Mhm.
I haven't maintained that connection very much. But it wouldn't be a huge lift to have it up and running in Unity again.
Mhm.
But the crazy thing to think about, like, I mean, this helped us with the project. Let's just say we had built a lot of stuff in Unity. This is not a brag. This is just like, wow, what a happy coincidence. We had built so much of our stuff in our own tools. And we had had a custom viewer built in C++ with SDL and everything. And we were kind of going that way. When it came time to pivot to using Godot, we didn't have to really throw that much out because we'd already built all this in our custom physics universe and the
Yep.
game works. And sure, it works without graphics, but you know, a lot of the game is, yeah,
Yeah.
graphics can go on top. But, we kind of got to keep that and take it with us. So if you want to go to a really extreme extent, let's just say we ship our game with Godot and we go, okay, time to make a mobile version. Oh, we don't really like, the mobile implementation of Godot. Let's do that and I don't know, make up an engine. Let's do that ourselves. Let's
Right,
roll it ourselves, or let's do it in Unreal Engine, or who knows what. Pick something. We could both be playing the same game with two different engines effectively, as
Yep.
long as we're using that shared physics kernel, which is kind of cool when you think about it as like hedging your bets in development and say, oh,
no,
well,
it's great.
if technology changes, no problem. We can support whatever this thing's running on as long as it can run the little kernel. Fred, don't let me overstate something if I'm getting something wrong here too.
Yeah, it's hard not to say engine because but that has so many connotations or built-in expectations already.
Yeah.
Um, it's really it's kind of like the model view
Controller.
controller, yeah, thing where uh, we're viewer agnostic. We don't care who's looking at it and how they're looking at it, as long as they grab the information that's there for them to see.
Right. That's awesome. So I know we're already at 2 hours. Are there any questions in stream that we should answer? I can't see the stream, but
I mean, so sorry, I should have given you the link so you could read alongside. Well, I mostly
Oh.
want to put the resounding, again, in aggregate, resounding thing I've been seeing in chat is I love Subnautica. It's one of my favorite games. So I just want to
Amazing.
make sure you get to see that, because that's
Thank
a lot
you.
of what I've been reading.
That's awesome.
And me too, just for the record.
Okay.
I got extremely lost in that. And I will also add Natural Selection 1, which I did get extremely lost in back in the day.
Awesome. Did we
You
lose
got
you
it.
for Did we lose you for NS2? Did we change too much? Were you like,
I
screw this?
No, I think I just wasn't playing games like that at the
Oh,
time.
okay.
I had moved on. I used to be multiplayer only, like 100% multiplayer. I wouldn't play that many single player games around that time.
Yep.
And I had like going to LAN parties helped a lot too.
Yep.
I'd done less of that and then moved on. And now I enjoy single player games and like co-op games a lot more these days.
Yep.
But yes, if there are questions in chat, you can you can.
I can't see. Wait a second.
I'll read them off.
Are they in Zoom?
People
Oh,
are
okay.
asking joke answers. That's not a
Okay.
real question, Captain Capacitor.
I want to go play Ur-Quan Masters again. It's been a while. I'm ready to like.
Someone said, I got nothing, but Subnautica is a masterpiece. Thank you. How about that?
Welcome. We got kind of lucky on that one. That's all I can say.
Yeah, I mean, relationship with my own creations is could give a whole talk on that, I think.
Yeah.
Someone
Somebody's-
said, oh, go ahead, Fred.
Ask him about changes made in Below Zero. What worked well?
So I didn't actually work on Below Zero because I was like helping the team a bit, but I was already working on Moonbreaker at that point. But I do know, so I mean, the things that didn't work, I think the above ground stuff, the Snow Fox, I think we all knew that didn't work that well. We really tried to make that work better. So that was kind of, I don't know if we learned a lesson or not, but it's kind of interesting because we actually released a trailer showing the Snow Fox, basically it's the Skidoo thing. We showed a trailer before we had figured out how to make it work because it was just early on. We just announced the game. And then we had the ice worm, which like comes out of the ice and stuff. Is really cool. But then we were like, oh, we got to make sure this stuff works really well in the game. And it was just really hard to make it work well, just from like a pacing and world design and just a user experience perspective. So that's just a trick of that's just a risk you have whenever you announce certain features. I mean, I guess we could have like cut those things, but we really wanted to make them work. So I just think they probably didn't work as well as we wanted them to. I think the stuff that worked really well, I think a lot of the level design was like way better than Subnautica 1, the first. I think we probably needed to make the world bigger. I think we were trying to make it a lot more detailed. So we kind of crammed everything in as high detail instead of Subnautica had like more clusters of like high detail and then sparse areas and then high detail. So yeah, I'm not sure. I think we probably learned some lessons there. I think the music is better. I think we have a lot more characters in the game, which was really nice, and speaking dialogue, which I think was kind of in some ways better, some ways worse. I think some players really enjoyed the isolation of Subnautica 1, but it was really nice to get some humanity in there and some flavor into the world. What else? Those are probably the big ones. I think the game was a lot more polished than Subnautica 1, just as general rule, and like just less buggy and stuff like that. It was less janky because it was starting to get, the tech was getting a little more mature, even though it grew out of a really rough prototype. So I think that was just totally my fault, because we started prototyping in Unity and we just like didn't have any money, so we couldn't. It was never crossing our minds that we were going to throw the prototype away and start over and choose the engine properly, figure out what the game needed, because we didn't even know what the game needed. So because it was so early on, so we just basically grew it out of a prototype. And I think there was a lot of like glitchiness in the original Subnautica that just took a long time to fix. The streaming voxel stuff was always kind of a thorn in our side. Pop in and some performance. Spent a lot of time optimizing that game to make it work, especially because we brought it to all the consoles and Switch. So that was just a huge lift technically to make all that work. Is so much work. That's kind of all I have to say about that.
Cool. No, that was a ton. I hope you're happy, audience
Sure.
member. I actually won. This one's kind of cheeky because it's sort of self-serving too, but or it can be self-serving. So what are your thoughts on doing early access for a game where you don't want to spoil the story?
I
Because
have a lot of
Subnautica had
thoughts
a
on
story.
this.
Pardon?
I have a lot of thoughts on this.
Oh boy.
Well, because this is what we did. We basically kind of went back and forth internally for Subnautica. Like once we started adding the story, we're like, what are we going to do here? We had a daily build for our beta branch, so anyone could play the kind of the live version of the internal build. And we're like, well, how does this work with a story? When we have spoilers, there are reveals and big moments in that storyline, and we didn't know if we should just release those. Or we also had, everyone back then was saying you only get one launch, you get your early access launch, and you never get anything else. We didn't know if we were going to be able to make a 1.0 launch, if that was going to be worth holding some ammo in the chamber, as it were, some whatever powder in the keg or whatever. I don't know the metaphor, but we basically decided, okay, we are going to release everything but the end of the game. And so we had just earmarked, there's a couple assets and things and gates that we left private and that would not be playable in the beta branch. And so that was one strategy. The other part was we realized everything else that wasn't the end that would spoil the game, like anything that we were putting into an upcoming big feature release, we would not hold back, because we thought that it was better to release it into beta branch. The players that wanted to see it early, there's no reason to hold it back from them, even though they could make videos on it and stuff like that. It's better that they make videos on the buggy version and the pre-release version, in addition to us then launching like a proper, update trailer, because we released a trailer with every big update every 6 to 8 weeks. We just thought more views are better. That was our basic idea. And especially we even had some big YouTubers like, Markiplier and Jacksepticeye and these really huge viewers. They were playing the beta branch, and I remember we were at one of our retreats and we had just put Rex in the game, and the Rex were so buggy. It was all in the beta branch. We hadn't launched them yet. They were like I think they were like not drawing, but like the loot inside them was there. So it was like floating, but you could like collide with it. It was some like horrible buggy mess. And I remember we were all cringing in person live, but we realized it was better that someone like that was playing a buggy mess and making a video on it for millions of players than it is to not have them make a video, because the game hadn't changed. There's nothing to cover. So we just philosophically, we just said it's always better to get people seeing your game, even if it's buggy. That's how we handled that. But we did hold back the 1.0 launch, the 1.0, leaving the planet. And then we actually, when we did launch 1.0, spoilers.
Sorry.
I'm sure it's like 8 years old now or whatever.
Yeah, it's you're safe. You're safe. You're
It's safe. Yeah, we're out of the zone. And actually, what was cool is when we launched 1.0, players could actually beat the game, and people actually replayed the game from the beginning so they could get the final launch sequence. And we got a huge bump. Like it was a really big, it actually worked. So we did get 2 launches out of it.
Nice. So when like you were trickling out story bits because someone could play part of a story and never get to the end,
Yep.
how did your audience relate to that? Is it like, ooh, it's an unraveling mystery, like Telltale game style episodic games, or like that was huge for a while too. Like, how did your community relate to, but the story's not done?
I think the players that really cared about a pristine, unchanging, perfect story would just not play. And the players who just wanted everything, even the left turns and the right turns and the redos and the edits, they would just play it all. And in fact, Below Zero, we rebooted the story. I can't remember how, I think it was probably like 8 months before we launched it, or 6 months. We just realized the story wasn't really working. It was too convoluted and it was going to be too hard to wrap up. So we basically just rebooted the entire story and started over. And I think, I mean, like stuff, players might have been annoyed, that they played some stuff and whatever, maybe had 8 or 10 hours into the game, and then all of a sudden it all changed. But it's early access. So, I mean, I think if you can't make a change like that, then what's the point of doing early access? And we wouldn't have known to make that change if we weren't in early access to begin with. So I think the game ended up by being way better because of those changes. So I think you just have to say, like, players can decide for themselves. They might support us during early access and play during early access. They might buy the game and then not play. They might not buy the game and wait till 1.0. There's like every version is out there, and it's not up to us, but we can provide many options. We try to make it really clear, like,
Yeah.
want to play
So you're honest about what the game is, and you're honest about what you're doing. We're
We're
like
generous with the updates. As generous as possible.
So with like holding back the ending, were you very like super clear bullet line, like the game ending is going to be secret land? Did people know that during early access, or did they learn that at some point?
I can't remember because I know we went back and forth on it for a while. I don't remember if we actually telegraphed it or not.
Interesting.
I don't think we were secretive about it, but I don't think we like made sure players knew. I don't think it was important. It wasn't important enough to try to like make sure they knew. I don't think. I could have that wrong.
Okay, no, I'm just curious. The reason I was saying that's a cheeky question is that's a real question we have too, where we have even our own community members who very intentionally like say we don't want to be spoiled. And part of doing open development, and one of the reasons we haven't been doing as much open development lately is, well, we want to respect your sort of, look, you're safe, you're in the clear, nothing will be spoiled. So when I had done streams, I very intentionally worked on parts that didn't have a story tie, and it helps that, my running joke is I'm not the story guy. I'm just doing mechanics and all kinds of things. But hearing you're sort of like, well, there's people who are along for a ride. There's a full spectrum of people that you can invite in to be part of your audience is like, that's very inspiring and it's cool.
I would encourage you to leak the story. I would just not, because people get so excited. Like, I want to find out what you're thinking about. What is it? What is his name? Biffo? I can't remember now.
Biffo?
Biffo, yeah. It's been like 30 years.
Oh, we're all thinking.
I thought about that name. Like, if you put something in, I'm in. If you remove it, that's fine. Like, I don't care. Like, I just want you talking about that guy. If you think of it the other way, like any silence that you have is basically a missed opportunity. Right? You're communicating with your fans. They want to hear everything. They want the inside scoop. So like, be generous with it. And if people are like, oh, whoa, I don't want anything to be spoiled, they'll just leave your stream. That they know that. And no, I don't really know anyone like that. But if they are, they just don't have to follow those streams,
Yeah, hopefully, I unfortunately think I have my own bias on it, which is I've never been spoiled on anything and felt like it ruined my experience, but I do too much like performance and stuff like that, where it's more about the execution and the experience and the immersion and all of that than like, okay, if you told me how Ender's Game ended, that's maybe the only thing. Like, sure, if you told me exactly how that ended, okay, it would have changed my experience. Or like The Usual Suspects,
or Sixth Sense, or something like that.
Yeah, but that's when the story hinges on that. Then if that was the only thing, let's just say Ender's. I mean, okay, I don't really like referencing Orson Scott Card, but yeah, let's use Sixth Sense. Right? Okay, so. Yeah. If there was nothing else going on in that movie except a big reveal, and there was nothing else interesting about watching it, then the reveal's not worth that much. You know,
Exactly.
you can't hang everything off that one bit. But
Exactly.
that's me, and you know, there's a full spectrum of opinions.
I do like, I was against it in the beginning, holding back the ending, but I do think it was the right choice for that game. But I would encourage you guys to release story stuff as you go, and then just change it if you need it. I think
It's
that's
all a lie. Yep.
Yeah.
and that's the whole journey. That's the whole dream of open development, right? Like you're everything that you spoil or that you change or whatever, people get annoyed that you change something. That's the downside. The upside is that you're making a better game, and no one is going to argue with you making a better game, and it's going to pay off exponentially.
I
So
really love that. Like honestly, I really love that. You know, I've, we've had our own journey to be here, and certainly something we couldn't do at Activision was open development. But having worked on games, and I use the term educational. I even said earlier, like what I missed, was teaching people, and what I loved about it streams is teaching people not just how games are made, but how I think and how we make mistakes and how we work together. Being able to build a community around that, even if someone says, "Well, I don't like that thing," well, you can have people who say they don't like that thing. That's important feedback. What's even more important is that nobody's shocked by where we're going because we've been honest about it. I don't want to be,
exactly.
I don't want to lie about what the game is. I want to say, this is what we're thinking. This is where we're going. Come along for the ride. And just, I think a little bit what we were talking about earlier too. It's like people, this sounds corny, but it's like people want something to believe in, and people want people to believe in, and people
Sure.
like seeing people create. And like, how can, like you said, who could argue with a better game? Who could argue with someone who's trying to do that and wanting to do it very honestly and not trying to like hoodwink you or,
Yep.
scam you out of money or whatever?
Yep. And the flip side, there's another huge element, which is how it affects the team and the team's energy and morale. Because when you can share stuff on a regular basis, it pumps you up it's incredible. And you've got like a multi-year development ahead of you, so I presume. So you need that energy, and you want your team to be engaged over the long haul. And that's, even if there was no publicity benefit at all, I think it's and even if it doesn't help the game, I think it helps the team, and it's worth it even for that alone.
Yeah, I 100%. I think people draw energy from different places, but for me, that's a big one. And actually, I tell our community all the time, I miss streams, and I'm even glad we could just do this and have a chat live. It's like I miss seeing them. I don't know what any of them look like, but I miss seeing them. I know almost all these names in chat. I recognize your names, even if I'm not reading them all
Awesome.
aloud. Like I know these people, and one of the challenges I've found working on a very small team, having worked on larger teams, is I don't have anybody to just get excited with. And for me, enthusiasm, even about bad ideas, even about like, hey, let me share this dumb joke or whatever, not water cooler talk, but like seriously talking about, oh, what could this be? If you go look at this backlog of streams and I think about, gosh, people have seen me do some pretty dumb stuff that's 100% going to get cut from the game, but I had to try it. That's the enthusiasm and energy that you're talking about. That's like, yeah, I, I love throwing my mistakes into the fire. That's tons of fun, but I have to make the
With high
mistakes.
fidelity screams.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, see, aren't you glad you put that out? You don't want to find that out at 1-0.
Steel mold. I kind of look like a Lux. Okay, wait, hang on. There was an actual question up there. Did Zen of Sudoku go the way you had hoped? Would you call it a success?
I mean, that was a casual game released in 2006, I believe. It was kind of the height of the PopCap downloadable game, $20 casual game madness. Not madness, but like loveliness. Like Peggle and I don't know, Bookworm and all these great
Yeah.
games came out at that time. And that was right before mobile. So we didn't have like an app store. We didn't have mobile games. So this was before the iPhone. So it was like right before all that. So I knew that I needed money, and I didn't have the team nor money to make Natural Selection 2. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll bootstrap that game with a smaller game that we can just make really quickly, and maybe we'll make some good money. And I calculated that I spent about 20,000 total in just like living expenses mostly, to make that game, and it made about $20,000. So I wouldn't really say it was a success. I wouldn't call it a failure exactly, but I it's really weird because I've played iPhone Sudoku games now, which are basically almost exactly the same UI that we had on that game. I was really happy with the UI loveliness in that game. Just simplified it, um, and made it really blissful and like super calm and just like a really like tranquil experience. Like it's basically taking the Sudoku game and making it like headspace or calm. It's kind of like adding that Zen atmosphere to it. It's a little cheesy, but
No, I appreciate it. I mean,
yeah,
and also you made the money back that you spent. That's very Zen, you know.
it's something. Yeah, get in. Yeah, it's karmic. I don't know. I wish we didn't. I wish we'd done it like 6 months earlier or a year earlier. It probably
Yeah.
the outcome would have been a bit different. But yeah, we learned something. It was fun to work on a small game for a change.
Well, you know, it's funny you even brought up the UI and like, okay, we could talk about copycatting and all that sort of thing. But when you talked about how the UI added bliss, you know, I don't know if it's like this for you, but you know, I think about, I would say this on streams. There's ideas that maybe wind up in games or don't wind up in games. Nothing ever gets thrown out. It just gets, there's a version 1.0, a version 2.0, whatever. Maybe it gets released in the wild. Maybe you drop it as a feature that's just not there anymore. But when you look at it, like I go look at my other projects, and especially if I haven't played it in a while, like I fire up Skylanders games maybe a
Mhm.
year ago or something like that. And oh, I forgot I did this. I forgot I did this. And one of the sort of surreal experiences I had looking at some Skylanders UI, which I had worked on, was I remember the Wii game that inspired this for me, and it was Zack and Wiki. I don't know if you ever played that game. It's a very little known Korean developer that made a horribly difficult puzzle, like adventure, kind of like old LucasArts puzzle game. Like, okay, I have like 5 items. What the heck do I do with them? And you played with the Wii remote pointer. And I swear they confused everybody in America with the marketing because the UI looked so happy and so cute, and the game was so cruel
Right.
and hard and difficult that I just thought about like how motivating it was for me as a player to go, wow, they clap and said, good job anytime I figured anything out. And I can't tell if they're patronizing me or
Right.
encouraging me, but just how like that feature in that moment, like, yeah, sure. Even you hearing like you talk about that, like, okay, well, but it sounds like you had an affection for that idea or something that was done. And did you ever feel like you could carry that forward and say, oh, well, I kind of loved this aspect of something I did, and now I'm going to consciously
I mean,
apply or reapply?
some of the tranquil and kind of bliss out elements made it into Subnautica, honestly,
Yeah,
because it's very peaceful, you know, but right before it gets
sometimes.
terrifying.
Yes.
But it kind of goes back and forth between ultra happy and beautiful and calm and ultra scary, dangerous, dark, deep, mortal, and you know, mortal danger. But it kind of, yeah. So I think it fits in there. Um, yeah, that's about it for Zen of
Cool.
Soduku. We're not making number two, I don't think. That late time passed.
Just go straight to number 5.
Yeah,
That's
there
the
you
real
go.
trick. You know,
There
we
you
learned
go.
from all the like cell phone marketing. Just jump the numbers a bit, you know,
Yeah,
get ahead of your competition.
yeah,
I'm starting to feel the energy drain, but I don't know, I want to check with
yeah.
you too.
We've been going 2.5 hours, so
Yeah, it's been forever. Natural selection 3 when?
no comment. I mean, it's so hard to make a shooter these days. Gosh, the budgets are insane. Like, wow.
Yeah, and I mean, my armchair analysis is live service games are kind of going this direction, not this direction.
I wonder,
So
is that
I think it would
true?
be hard to pitch
Right.
it. I
I
don't
think
know.
you're right, but I haven't really put that together. Is that true? I guess it is.
I mean, it's sort of like, you know, the rise and fall of MMOs, right? I mean, I realize we're trying to stop talking here, but it's the rise, you know, MMOs like, oh, there was room for tons and everybody was trying them. And I sort of feel like live service games are in a similar arc where, oh, there's tons and they're going to try it. And they're like, oh, this is more niche than we thought. It'll work here and work there. And it's going to, the sort of many small successes will be harder. There's going to be the big titans like Apex Legends or whatever, League of Legends. You just put Legends in your game name,
Yeah.
but then there aren't going to be as many experimental ones because I've seen so many live service required games come up and disappear. I mean, what was the thing that happened last week where the game left early access and it got shut down 4 days later? It's
Oh
just
no, what game was that?
I don't remember. It was a big kerfuffle on the internet, and I stay out of it. I'm just a humble developer. But I do see, like, I think about it. I could be wrong. I'm not, nobody pays me to say this. So but I'm like, I think live service games are kind of
Oh,
sloping downwards and other things are gonna come take their place. I could be wrong.
the day before.
Day before, that's the one. Yeah.
It went from one of the most anticipated games of the year to receiving a flood of negative reviews. Now the developers behind the game are closing up shop. Ouch.
Yeah, I don't know. I honestly have no idea what happened there other than watching the sort of Steam release into like all I know is Steam release shut down, servers are shutting down. Like, wow, that's crazy, and that's of course a frailty of live service games, just in
It
general.
is. It's also, yeah. I mean, if you, yeah, it looks like the trailer maybe didn't look like the actual game at all.
Yeah, there was some sketchy looking stuff people say. I don't know. No comment on any of it. I was just thinking about like, oh, if there were another natural selection game, is there an audience for that game, period? Like, or who would they be playing on consoles? I have no idea who's playing those games. Like you said, shooter, it's like, oh, you got to reach so high.
I mean, I'm just reading this. It's really easy to make a mistake on Steam. Like we botched our business model on Moonbreaker. It was such an innocuous framing thing, but we did like we did a business model mistake. It's just a mistake. And it really cost us. It's like, oh, like if you have a bad launch into early access, it can be really tough to come back from it. I think we did come back from it, but it was brutally hard. And it's just not easy, especially if you're trying something new. It's not easy.
Yep. So what did we all learn here today? Try early, get it out in front of people, get the feedback. Don't commit, don't hold your ideas back forever and bank everything on it. Oh gosh, this game development's hard.
It is hard, and it seems to be getting harder. That's what I find really strange. It doesn't, even after all the, I mean, Fred, you're one of the few developers I've met that might have been making games, I guess has been making games longer than I have. But I mean, I don't know, is this going to be your easiest project? Does it feel like the easiest project? It might be your hardest project.
Yeah, no project feels easy.
Why is that? They should get easy at some point.
Why is that? Well, what people think is fun is you can't measure that and you can't predict it. So yeah, it's always a roll of the dice.
Something. I mean, maybe technically the risk is reduced, but I don't know, 30 years ago, I don't remember bugs in that game.
Well, there was a famous
find
one.
them. Yeah, the landing bug.
Was there? What was the bug?
The first versions, you could sell more landers than you had.
I think I do remember that, but I think that was more.
You were
like,
just being kind. Yeah.
No, I had forgotten about it, but now that you say it, it rings a bell. But in a single player game, that always just, I mean, cheats are a thing. It feels like a feature more than a bug.
Yeah, that's what I always said.
You don't have to.
Yeah, that's our defense too.
You don't have to use it. If you want to use it, cool. I mean, look at
exactly.
what Civilization did.
Yeah.
Ramp the difficulty yourself.
Totally. Remember when Civilization added the cheat menu for, I think it was Civ 2, and Sid Meier was like, how, he wasn't the lead on that game. It was Brian, why am I forgetting his last name right now? The guy that went on to do, I forgot his last name now. Anyways, he added a cheat menu because he knew that players wanted to be able to like cheat in stuff and cheat out and just try this like sandbox stuff. And it was fantastic.
So now it's not out of place in games. You have creative mode and lots of, games that intend you to have a difficult time. But if you don't want to have a difficult time, do whatever you want. Somebody asked, okay, maybe we can make this last question, then we can wrap up. But somebody was asking for Moonbreaker. What was you said you had a business model mistake, and yeah, what was the mistake? Someone asked.
Yeah, we wanted to, so the whole game as a digital miniatures game, we always wanted that to be a live service. And so we launched it. We thought the game was more done than it was. And we thought, okay, we're going into early access, but we're going to polish it up. And this is the beginning of our basically live service. So we had miniatures planned and in production for months and months and months. We had all of our audio dramas that we were making. We had like all sorts of story stuff. And basically that all comes down to having an in-game store, like place where people can like, buy model alternates and things like that and virtual currencies. And we'd actually tested the game with a couple hundred friends and family, but those friends and family, when we added a store for them, we gave them currency because they're just friends and family. They didn't have to buy the game. So right near the end, right before we launched early access, we were just working like crazy to get this brand new store in the game. And we put the currencies in the game, and we just literally put the currencies on the main menu. That was our crucial mistake. So when you bought the game and you run it, you see I think we had like 4 or 5 currencies, which sounds ridiculous, right? And then when I say it out loud, but they were like, one was a hard currency, everything else was earned. And players just immediately thought we were going to mistreat them.
Yeah.
Did we mistreat them? Nope. Were we planning to? Nope. But the perception was, here's a developer that is like going down the dark path. And we just got reamed, like just right out of the gate. And we removed the store and never returned it. It was gone. We removed it within 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And like it was a tough thing to recover from.
Ouch. Well, I hope I wasn't too putting my foot in my mouth when I said I think live service games are on the way out, but
well, I mean, I think we felt that like it's a tough market. It's a really tough market it's also really hard to make a live service game because you have to plan out all this content and it has to be great. And some of the timelines on that content is really long. And how do you know what parts of your game players are going to resonate the most with? It's hard to know. Basically, it's impossible.
Yeah.
So,
kind of what Fred just said, which is how do you, there is no formula for what's going to be fun. So if you put all your chips on the one thing and hope it works, it hurts when it doesn't.
Totally.
Yeah.
And you're making a lot more work for yourself before you get to that initial release. So like you're kind of making the whole thing more difficult because you're just creating so much more of it, and then, so yeah, it's just harder, just a lot harder.
Totally. I worked very briefly on one live service product and that's it. I never want to do it again. I will if I have to, but yeah. Oh yeah. No, I don't.
I love the concept. It's so awesome. It's just hard. And players want you to support the game, but like with Subnautica, we actually keep supporting the game. With natural selection, we kept supporting the game. It was never a live service, but we did keep updating it. Although at some point we did have to stop because there were just no longer made sense financially.
Yeah.
You can't keep making a game forever. So that's what we wanted to fix with Moonbreaker, is align our incentives between our fans and the company.
But yeah, that's sort of the dream. For me, I've said this on stream a lot of times, but like Dwarf Fortress is a huge inspiration to me because that is a case where they have done that, right? And now it's on Steam and it's maybe going to become more accessible to people.
Oh my God, that was my idea, by the way.
What?
I told Tarn, you have to put this thing on Steam. Please do it. And he listened.
Tarn, also, would you like to talk to us sometime? I would love to talk to you sometime. Please put me in touch.
Let's get Tarn on here.
You got a number? No, anyway, well, we just talked to, I was talking with Jason Greenblatt, who's also in touch with Tard too. So Caves of Cud, the Freehold Games folks. So we had a live stream with them, and I was bringing this up with him too. And I met him at an in-person event, and he's like, "Oh, I got his number. He was just texting me," and I was just kind of like, I try to keep my fanboy down sometimes, but I'm just like, it's not so much fanboy. It's like, you're an inspiration. That's the kind of thing for me. It's like, wow, what you did. And so like, we started our Patreon because I loved what they did with their Patreon. And like, granted, they're a small team and they needed to make more money to support like healthcare. And I totally understand their complete arc of their story. And I do think having it on Steam is a great idea. But what I loved about their model of what they're doing is they kind of had a niche. I would not put Dwarf Fortress in front of so many people and expect them to have fun with it and get it. But they're able to build this idea of like, we want to keep working on this. This is our life's work. Anybody else here to do this, support this? Yes. And they were so open about their communication and everything they did. It was like, seriously, when we were starting, I wanted a Patreon for us because for me, I would rather people, like you said, live service, it aligns with everything. I don't want to like have to sell you a game for money. And the games market isn't built for this. I would much rather be supported as an artist and give away my game and then just have people support me be able to continue to make something than to charge you per product, because it's a digital distribution. It doesn't make sense. It's free to copy. But the problem is, if I market my game as free, it's either free to play, which can have some connotations, and live service negative, oh, are they coming for me? That sort of thing. I don't want to do that. But also, if you market your game as just straight up free, it's like confusing capitalism, where it's like, if you give it away, it must not be very good. It must be a bad game. So they're almost like my vision. Here's my like high-minded, I don't know how this is going to work. Patreon's kind of starting to do it or trying to do it, but it doesn't make sense with the games marketplace yet. If you're selling a game on Steam, is like seen it in places like Newgrounds, itch.io has a community of it a little bit, but it's still so niche. I would love to see that become more powerful, and that become the next wave is, hey, you can have this game, just support my ability to keep supporting this game and carry it forward. I sort of see we almost hit the target with like the Xbox Live, whatever, Xbox game, the subscription-based thing. But I'm like, no, that's just the executives taking a cut version of it. I want the direct-to-creator support, my ongoing creation support, and be able to hand it off or whatever needs to happen. That's the other sort of thing. So anyway, that was a bit, that was very rambly, but we've been here for a while. And I just think like, I want to do that. I want that too.
Did you see what we did for Natural Selection 1 with the community donations?
I don't remember.
So you probably didn't have any money back then, but
I was broke, yeah.
And I certainly, when I was that age, I don't think I was really paying for that stuff because I didn't have any money. But if you sent me $20, then and your Steam ID, then I just had a little database and would give you, whenever you play online, it had like a little flag next to your name so people knew that you were a Constellation member. And I lived off that donation program. I mean, it wasn't a great living. I think it was like $18,000 a year, but it was just enough for me to eat and pay rent and get the company started.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, and that's also like if the game's online, and there's like, that's such a cool way to do it. And I mean, I love what Zach and Tard did. Like, here's a crayon drawing, that was seriously, that was what we started with. And I have a silly brainstorming document of here's all the ridiculous stuff I did. Another big inspiration for me was I forget their name. The person who does dinosaur comics. They have a Patreon and they have the most absurd rewards. Like if you give them $100 a month, they literally will ship you one of their possessions every month and then tell you the story about it. And I'm just like,
oh my gosh.
So I could like send someone my old shoe and just tell you about the shoe and write a paragraph about it. That's kind of fun. Brilliant. I mean, it's whimsical. It's ridiculous. It's the kind of like, it engenders the community spirit of like, what are we here for? I get that people just want the game, too, when they don't want my old shoe.
There's something that just crossed my mind. I just read the Ken Williams wrote a book, the founder of him and what's her name? What's his wife? Roberta. Thank you.
Yeah.
They wrote a book, or I don't know who wrote it, about the rise and fall of Sierra. And it reminded me that back in that time, they just gave out their phone number. So like if you played one of their games and you had a problem, like anything from a tech support problem to where do I click on level 9, you could literally call one of Roberta or Ken and they would just pick up and talk to you. Like, how friggin' cool would it be in this day and age to make a game where you gave out your number and anyone that played your game could just call you? Like, I want to do that. I think it'd be awesome. It sounds awesome.
I mean, we have an infrastructure for doing. We're kind of doing it right now with Twitch, right? I mean, we have people in chat like asking things. So
they can't just talk to you. Only when you choose. You know?
I mean,
you're right.
No, but I'm seriously like, look, we're all.
I'll give your number out if you.
Okay, that's Fred's answer. I'm like, we're all game developers here.
Let's have a vote in chat.
What was it Max Payne that had an actual phone number you could discover in the game and call? And the part of the game was when you actually made a phone call and there was like the dream sequence. I could be crossing my wires here, but I swear there was, or was it God of War? And Kratos would answer. I think it was like the original God of War.
There was a dream
Starfighter.
sequence with the phone in Max Payne for sure, but I don't
Yeah.
know if it called anyone real for real.
I could be just getting my wires crossed of
It may be.
around all these meta ARGs things. Captain Capacitor. Okay. We have people giving out gift subs to people in chat. You can't see this right now, but thank
Okay.
you. Thank you, JP. Thank you, Captain Capacitor. But yeah, I'm like, okay, we're game designers here. We're game developers. Sure, the core conceit is call me and you can talk to the creator, but like there's got to be some way to, I don't want to turn that into its own game, or like get in touch with the creator is a puzzle you can solve in the
Oh, that's
game.
fun.
And then
That's
somehow
really fun.
it shoots an email and you can write an email in game or something. I don't know.
I love that.
That's just me talking out of my
No, I
my-
love that. You just
Yeah.
baked it into the game.
We'll find something there. I don't know. I have a few insane ideas like that,
Well,
but this
and-
is up my alley.
You've seen Path of Exile, I'm sure. You know, Path of Exile is free,
Yeah.
with crap loads of cosmetics, and they are making bank. They're doing great.
Yeah. I actually don't know how they do it, to be honest. I played that game back years ago when it was in beta-esque. And there's a whole other story about similar games too. Titan Quest, that's an old one.
Well,
To think about.
my founder worked, he was employee number 1 on that game.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, tell them I played the crap out of that game.
Oh my God, that was so the first version of Natural Selection, we're going to connect 2 worlds together right now. The first version of Natural Selection 1, the mod, we played at the Titan Quest office. That's how I met, well, that's basically how I met Max, who's my co-founder for Unknown Worlds. But the very first game we ever played was at their office when there were like 5 people.
Oh my gosh, that's okay. Well, it's a small world, I guess, but that is really cool. And not only did I play a lot of Titan Quest, I think one of the developers who worked on Titan Quest went to work on Grim Dawn.
No, that's Arthur. Arthur, yeah, he went and founded Crate.
Yep.
Yeah,
And so, and then,
and I used to work with Arthur at that company right before that at Stainless Steel on Empire Earth. That was the RTS I mentioned. So
we can't avoid each other. We were just stuck together in this tiny little universe.
Oh, don't worry, he'll move away. That's what happened to me.
I haven't moved away from Fred yet.
Hey, I'm right here. I can hear you. I'll still be up in Sonoma sometimes.
Well, wait. Well, when you're up, please give us a. I mean, I'm not too far from it. I'm in San Francisco, so you know, when you're up next time, we can have a gathering, and I'll watch you two play Super Melee, and it'll.
Oh
be
my
hilarious.
God! I'm going to Anderson you. See if you can defend against it.
All right, well, have you? This is being recorded, so we have you on the books for this.
Okay, so tell me what you think. But what I remember is that you could find the sticking point.
Yeah.
And once you land it, it's basically just their crew is like.
Yep.
That was the dream. So
yes,
I think it usually had to do with like getting an angle as you hit them or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it was difficult to land or stick the landing, but yeah.
Right. Okay. Get a little Shinjesu little ridge, stick it in there, or like maybe Kara is like so easy to get stuck in there.
Yeah, it's believe it or not, I mean our current. I really am trying to wrap this up because I'm like, gosh, we're getting a little, we are getting a little delirious, but or I'm getting a little delirious, but what I will say is we have the prototype right now, which runs at 60 frames per second. At 60 frames per second, it's even easier to do that. So I hope you'll enjoy the current Anderson that stands right now. We may have to nerf this strategy, but if you think about doing damage on a like 1 per frame, like that kind of thing, at 24 frames per second, no problem. It's all right. Whatever. If you get lucky,
does it do damage
lucky.
per frame? Is that how all that damage is calculated?
I think so, Fred.
You mean in the old game or the current
Old game?
game?
Old game, yeah, Ur-Quan Masters.
Yeah, it was pretty much per frame.
Oh.
Yeah. So
well, I mean, there could be it could be per frame. I don't remember exactly how the Androsynth worked, but
you're flying by your pants back then. You're like, oh, let's just try it, and then frame rates will never change.
Yeah, exactly.
Back then,
what is a frame rate?
Yeah, exactly right. No one's talking about it. You just got to figure it out yourself.
Yeah, well, so the good news is we're up from 24 frames per second to 60 frames per second. And right now, without any mitigations in place, I'm not saying this is how we're going to ship, without any mitigations in place, the Anderson Rex ships that are the wrong quote unquote shape. Just FYI.
Can't wait. Oh my God.
Hey, we might fix it.
Amazing.
Or we won't fix it and we'll just say it's, you know, the joke now with the kids skill issue. Oh, you can't get the Andersons to do its OP thing that takes a lot of effort to master. Skill
Right.
issue.
Yeah, that's right. User error.
Yeah, user error. Pepcac. All right. Well, we should.
I'm
We
in.
should.
Let's do it. Let's do a tournament.
We can do it. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
Well,
somewhere
when you're
around.
up, we'll play it. We can also maybe sometime. Seriously, it is network enabled. We can. I'd be happy to show you the tools sometime, and we could. I
Yeah.
could actually give you Super Melee, and we could play it sometime. I'd love
My
to have
God,
you as a play tester.
We should do that.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we're scheduling the next stream right now. Not scheduling. Sorry. Designing the next one.
That
We'll
sounds
schedule it
awesome. Count me
later.
in.
All right. Cool.
Well, really great to meet you guys.
Yeah, you too.
Super
Yeah.
fun.
This was super fun. Thank you so much for making the time for it. And like, I really, really, really appreciate your time. I mean, both of you too, because Fred doesn't want to talk to me. You know, he'd rather be programming, but
Yep.
but no, seriously, thank you so much for making the time to come here. And like I said, I try not to fanboy too hard, but I've played a lot of your games and it's really cool to meet you. And you know, there's a generational aspect here where I'm like, oh well, it was very influential to me and I really enjoyed it.
That's awesome. Well, you know my story, with the game that shall not be named. So all over it. I'm all over it. This is like, yeah. Fanboy little Charlie would be like jumping up and down screaming right now. So
Got to find that house to rent in Vermont or wherever it was.
there you go. Oh my gosh. Back and forth.
I will jump up and down and scream right now, but I think my neighbors would worry someone's dying. So I will spare that and at least say, yeah, thank you for talking. We'll do it again. We'll have a play session. We'll have a test session, whatever. We'll figure out something else, but it was really great to talk with you. Really
Yeah,
great
nice to talk to you.
Thanks to everybody,
right.
which I couldn't see, but I heard that you're here. So
we read your questions. Thank you. Thank you, chat. They're over there. Chat canonically is over there. You just can't see them.
That's awesome.
All right. Thanks, Charlie.
Cool. Thanks, everyone.
See you later.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
And for the people who are still just watching the stream, I will just do a brief sign off and say thank you for being here, everybody who is watching this live. I can stop the recording too, but I should be saying all of our socials and stuff right now, but I'm a little too tired. There's going to be a thing that pops up that says follow us on the site known as Twitter to me in my head still. The Ur-Quan Master. We have a Discord you can join. You heard us talking about development streams and how fun those are. Hope to bring some of them back next year. But if you enjoyed this, please join our Discord, join our subreddit, UQM2, code name UQM2, Free Stars Children of Infinity. That is the real name now, but we still call it UQM2. Please join us there, join the conversation. Give us money on Patreon. That's great too. Someone said they'd buy me a sandwich or maybe I was making them a sandwich. I forget. We like money. Money helps us make games. We are doing this entirely with your support at this point. So please, if you like what we're doing, help us make a game for you. We want you to enjoy it. And I think I'll just sign off here.